beginning of the end for you.
The sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun.
A mighty sword!
Strike while the iron's hot.
For Camelot! For Avalon!
Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
Hi, Smite fans, and welcome back to the Smite Pro League on this wonderful Saturday here in Alpharetta, Georgia. We've got two big matchups for you today, and our biggest one, the match of the week, is going to be the one that kicks things off. We're going to have a World's Finals rematch between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans to see just how much these two teams have changed in the upcoming months here. We did have a nice little matchup between them during the kickoff tournament. Maybe not as big here. It's J-Mac and Trelly, though, here to join me for game number one between these two teams. And going back again, you know, this Worlds rematch, we finally get a more legitimate look to see just how well these two teams will stack up now.
Yeah, obviously we did have that rematch during the sort of launch tournament of this season, but again, people were trying to hold back their strats. They didn't want to give up too much away. This time, though, the standings actually are on the line.
Well, let's take a look at the schedule to see what all we have in store for today and what you may have missed, as this week is already halfway over. The Solar Scarabs fell to the Camelot Kings yesterday 2-1. The Oni Warriors fell down to the Jade Dragons in a 2-0 matchup. Now, today, we'll kick things off with the Leviathans and the Titans, and then we'll end off our day with the Valkyries and the Warriors as our second and final set. And then we'll have three more sets kicking off tomorrow at 11 a.m., but that's for then. Let's get into now here. The Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans. Leviathans, we kind of expected, you know, this team to still have those highs coming in from the end of the World Championships, this to still be that top team out there, but as you can see in the standings, they have suffered a loss. It was to the Oni Warriors of the teams coming out here. Maybe not the most expected of them. It was something that initially coming to the season, we thought maybe would be reserved for teams like the Dragons or the Kings, and maybe even the Titans coming up in here as well.
Yeah, the Oni Warriors able to take down the Leviathan was a huge upset, and then finding themselves falling to the Jade Dragons 2-0, it really makes you question where the Leviathans stand on that spectrum. The Titans, obviously, undefeated, but have only played once. So it's really a question of, is this like a rock, paper, scissors, where I have rock, you had paper, but we have scissors now, or is it just the Leviathans aren't looking as crisp as they were last year? It really depends on, you know, what they bring this today.
That rock, paper, scissors match had a fourth one in there. We had four teams that were all in this big circle of beating each other out here. But let's talk about the Atlantis Leviathans, this former World Championship team now finding themselves on the lower half of the standings, at least as this second week continues on here. And talking a little bit about the solo lane, we've had a lot of change-ups to the solo lane meta since that World Championship, where before it was pretty much, like Camazot's RDO and then maybe like Achilles sprinkled in there. Those were kind of the three. Now we've got a lot more of these assassins going over towards the solo lane, but it doesn't seem that the Leviathan solo laner hardcore really cares about that. He's still just playing a lot of what he was playing last season.
Yeah, whether it's he's caught in that or he just wants to, he thinks it's good, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, right now, RDO is still extremely strong in the meta, so that sort of pick is never going to fall out of fruition. But you're right to say that we're not really seeing the cleanup because Panatom wants to take that into the jungle. We're not really seeing the Bastet as well. Those are the sort of things that are reserved for Panatom in the jungle, obviously. So Yarkor, a different sort of play style, but still very aggressive.
Did see the Bologna come out in their set up against the Oni Warriors. So a little bit of change-ups and a little bit of shakes into what the more current meta is. We have been seeing, like I said, a lot of shake-ups over there. The auto-attack warriors became really big at the start of the season. Now we've been seeing kind of this mix where some Guardians are finding their way back over there, especially with a lot of changes to things like that Jade Emperor's Crown. That seems to have become a very popular item for these solo Guardians.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of different styles of builds, but I'm enjoying, because, you know, we were seeing pretty much just exclusively Death Toll Hunter Warriors for a while, but now that we can see action like this, where Yarkor just finds some aggression at level 5, able to find solo kills in this lane. Usually it's more so just a boxing match, but when you're able to find some aggression like this, it's a much different solo lane matchup to watch.
Yeah, it's created a nice little diversity over there into that lane and brought a sprinkle of spice, to say the very least, on that lane. I mean, different starter items in particular. We've seen things like the Vamp Shroud, the Tainted Steel coming out of some of these Guardians. Even with the Warriors, we're seeing a mix of Bluestone, Warriors Axe, and things like Death's Toll, all depending on when you're coming out. So we have a nice little bit of flavor going over in that solo lane.
Yeah, absolutely. You never really know which matchup you're going to be going for. Are you dealing with one of these assassins that's going to build full damage and just rotate to these team fights and shred my backline? Or are you going to just have one of the tankiest characters in the game on like an RDO or a Cerberus and just being a complete nuisance? It really depends right now, and that's sort of where the good solo laners are able to find their success. Are you picking these weird things, or are you just sticking to the meta?
Yeah, and even with these assassins, we've been seeing a lot of flavor over there too. I mean, Kleena, Bastet, all kinds of things popping over there. But before we go any further into this one, we did have Mifflin manage to sneak a little bit of an interview here with some of the Leviathans players. Let's see what Mifflin and the Leviathans had to say.
Have you seen the gorilla interviews?
What?
Have you seen the gorilla interviews?
No.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like you haven't seen any of them?
No.
All right, well, pay attention, because this one's going to go out live very shortly.
All right, have fun.
I think we got the Leviathans in studio. Dave,
Be
I mean
safe.
it. You got to watch this one. All right. So, Jordan has found me again with a little tiny mic with a little tiny afro. I won't interrupt these guys. They're playing a match here. What's the score with these guys, Oxy? What's going on?
Hello. What happened? What do you need?
What's the score?
The score? 3-30.
3-30 right now. Shinto getting rocked. Yarkor, clearly a champion. What do we think? What do we think about our odds in the match today?
About Titans?
Yeah.
It's gonna be like a fun one.
It's going to be a fun one. Let's check in with Panatom. Panatom, how's it feel being the best jungler ever?
The best jungler ever?
That's what I said.
Don't say that, bro. Adapting is hearing, bro.
Okay, hopefully Adapting's not listening. And if you are, I'm sorry.
Adapting is the best one, bro.
Yeah, okay. Do you have any added pressure being on my fantasy squad?
No?
No?
Because I know, like, we're gonna have good points because we have a good team, you know?
Okay, okay. Good points regardless. I might be happier about it than they are. That's it for the Leviathans. Easy interviews. They're easy.
I like the nice little bit of humbleness that brought there by Panatom. You know, Mifflin comes in, how's it feel being the best jungler? They said, well, Adapting is still watching. Just showing a little bit of respect over towards the king here. Just a lot of fun and confidence here onto the team. Also about that 3-30, that's actually the date that I changed the board that has that score on there to be the date of like one of the days that the teams came in for one of their media days to there. So luckily nobody was getting rocked in a 3-30 match in ping pong here. But maybe a bit of a rock-up of a match between these two teams here. Leviathans facing off against the Tartarus Titans now. And talking about the Titans specifically, this mid laner Paul has been one that's been the eye of everybody's target. I mean, when he was the two-time champion for his team in the Worlds, I mean, that was the player that everybody was putting so much focus on. We've seen so much change up in the picks and bans. The mid-meta has changed up so much. And teams are still trying to spend 5-6 bans against Paul. It's still not working, Trelly.
Yeah, Paul definitely hailed as one of the best mid laners in the world. Shinto right up there in that conversation as well. But as you mentioned, really trying to ban out Paul doesn't seem to work. His god pool is just too deep. Even if he finds some success on these top meta picks like the Thoughts, like the Zeus or the Tiamat, that sort of thing, he can still play really anything. You know, you have to worry about his Morgan, the Zhang Kui he can whip out as well. Even the Hell, those sort of picks are always going to be threatening for a team. So if you are going to ban out Paul, which doesn't exist, you're going to be pretty much wasting those bans unless you just really don't want to deal with those specific picks.
I mean, it's come such a long way for Paul. I remember watching this player all the way back in the earlier days of the SCC. I mean, he was a Freya, a Hell, a Habwa, and an Uller. I mean, those were pretty much the four gods he was running it down every single time. And yes, I am including Freya as a Freya mid pick that Paul really used to run there. But, well, obviously we don't see the Freya nearly as much, but some of those other gods still able to find their way through here. Not seeing the Helm nearly as much, but I think it's right to kind of mention here that Paul is a player that you can't really expend a whole lot of bans on. You take away the top picks right now, which are like the Zeus and the Thoth, and then you kind of just mitigate so much what Paul is able to do.
Yeah, you try to put some pressure onto him in that mid lane, but also if you're not focusing him, there's still a lot of different weapons on this Titans roster. Obviously with their new addition, SOT, in that solo lane, that's going to be an interesting matchup there because, you know, obviously Paul is able to hard carry. Everyone knows that, though. Everyone knows what Paul's able to do. The question is, do you have these sleeper carries in the back, like, you know, your Cyclone Spins, for example, if he's able to get online, that sort of thing?
Well, with these two teams here, we were able to talk to him a little bit before we jumped into the full game. So we got a nice little interview for a couple of these players. One with the Titans, one with the Leviathans. Let's get to that interview real quick.
Oh, how do I say this without, like, revealing strategies?
I think both of our games were really sloppy. The games are in the jeans. I think they were playing the map better than us, for sure. But we somehow ended up winning up. That was huge. And against the Warriors was sloppy too.
I thought we played pretty good because Dragons are a pretty solid team. Like, they're usually around middle of the pack. So a quick 2-0 is, I think everybody is pretty satisfied with that. So far, so good.
I always say this, but I think when you are like at the top, everyone's gonna try to do what you're doing. So it's really harder to keep up there. So I think we are just gonna watch some bots back, and then we try to figure it out what is going to be the best way to play the game for us.
So for week 2, coming in from week 1, what we wanted to improve on is kind of like getting together more as a team, because we just got sought instead for Benji, right? So we're trying to just work on the synergy a bit, try to figure out what we're playing, and just kind of come together as a team and just play as best as we can together. So Leviathans as a team, I mean, they're probably the best team right now. I mean, they just won Worlds, right? They did just lose to Onis though, which is, that's kind of surprising. But I think they're still probably a top team, so I think it's going to be a tough set. So, I mean, that sounds like fun though.
Team Paul is probably the best player in that team, and he's like the most consistent one too. So he's like weird to see him having like bad games.
Dude, Leviathans, I feel like every game it's someone else. Like they have a bunch of pretty good players. So I don't know, like one game it'll be like Yorkor, another game it'll be Shinto, another game it'll be like wrong. I don't know, all of them, man. They take their turns, bro. I feel like they're all just they all have their moments.
I always like to be like 2-0 or 2. I think that's always my mentality when I came in. But right now, if there are good games, I'm gonna be happy with that. So I'm just hoping for good games, and hopefully we can get the win.
So how I think the set's gonna go is that's a tough question, because I don't know, man. If I have like an ego and I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna be easy 2-0, and then we get stomped, it's not gonna look very good. So I'm gonna try to be modest and say it could go either way. But we're playing well. They're playing pretty well, so flip a coin. Let's see what happens.
Well, hopefully the Titans don't have to depend on a coin flip to decide their decisions here in this setup against the Atlantis Leviathans. And I think it's important what Paul pointed out there is that with this Leviathans roster, it really is a different player every single week, every single set, even every game seems to have somebody else who is in the driving seat for this team, whether that be a solo lane or Yorkor, whether that be Panatom out of the jungle. Anybody can really make an impact on this team. But similar can be said for the Titans. I mean, whenever they brought Layers onto this roster, he made a massive impact. He really changed up their picks and bans a lot. And you have a lot of these more silent carry games. I mean, Cyclone it'll be like, oh man, we haven't heard Cyclone's name in a while, and all of a sudden we look down and he's like, what, like 4 or 5-0 or something like that at that point. This matchup could really go either way, Trelly.
Yeah, I think this is the mark of a good team, having those silent killers, as we mentioned. Of course, just knowing, hey, Paul's going to perform well at shutdown Paul is one thing, but when you have these side lanes that are able to hard carry, as they mentioned, are you going to put some stock into Shinto, and then you look back and Zap and Yarkor are level 20, and they're able to carry this game as well. So I think this is the mark of these top-level teams, where they don't just have one player you have to shut down. They have 3 or 4, as well as a strong team fight, and it's just, difficult to deal with.
And it's something that we talk about with a lot of these top teams. These two, I feel in particular, we hit on the most with are teams that the backliners have a very difficult time, or have a very easy time, I should say. It's difficult for the other team to get to these backliners. I mean, Paul and Shinto, 2 of the safest mid laners in the game right now. It seems like it's almost impossible to find a kill onto them at any point. I mean, there were times last season where these guys were getting 10.0 KDAs in a week. I think Paul had like the highest single week KDA at one point with like a 41 or something completely absurd like that. But that's because he went over the course of like 6 or 7 games where he didn't die but like one time through there. I mean, how do you ever get to these kinds of mid laners when Paul and Shinto are putting up these 5-0 and these like 6-1 types of games?
Yeah, it's positioning for one thing, but also it's just great tank play by both of these squads as well. You have to look at Aurora and Rongyu when you think about how safe these players are able to be, because not only do they have peel, not only do they have setup, not only do they have disengage, but they also just have these, you have a familiar voice in your ear saying, hey, there's this happening, there's this happening. The comms are also so clear. I mean, both of these teams are just super safe, but they're also commanding presences on the map. They know where to find their leads. Their farm game is absurdly well, so it's just a difficult time to deal with.
And you never know what to expect out of the Sullen either. Are you going to get the Yarkor that's rotating to your mid lane at level 10? Or are you going to get the Sot that's teleporting to dual lane to fight over Obelisk in the early game? I mean, you don't know what's going to happen with these. And I think that's another matchup to really kind of dig into here. Is the last time these two teams really face off. You know, we had the kickoff tournament, sure, but the last real competitive set, major competitive set that we had between these ones was at the World Championships, and it was Benji versus Yarkor in that case. So now Sot has to step in to try and face up against this Leviathan solo.
Yeah, who Mifflin hails as one of the best, if not the best, mechanical player in the league. Niv has put lots of respect on SOT's name, and picking him up in this spot, you either have you have big shoes to fill, right? Because you do have this roster that had quite successful last year, but they didn't win. So in that sense, you also have a lot to prove, saying, hey, we were pretty good, but we think we're the best. And now that we have SOT on our team, is he going to rise to the occasion, or is he going to get a little nervous into the matchup against the current world champions, I should say, because they haven't been beaten yet, obviously. So still, it's much to see in that solo lane.
Yeah, I mean, even still, though, with SOT, whenever he was over on the Scarabs roster, he was able to make a large impact in that solo lane for that team and really was able to make a nice little switch up here and really help elevate the Scarabs alongside the remainder of their team, even throwing Scream's name in there with that one. But with these teams out to here, talking about the carries even, I mean, Leviathans are known for, we kind of joke about it sometimes, but even these guys love to joke about it. This is a team that if Zapman dies at the beginning of a team fight and then the Leviathans just kill 3 or 4, they're laughing all the way because it's their tried and true plan. Zapman dies, we still win the team fight out here. We do have a brief delay, though, before we get into the game, so we're going to take it to a very quick break, and then we'll come back with the start of Picks and Bans for Game 1.
I promised I would wait for you, but I'm getting so impatient. Tell me that you're ready now. This room is big enough for two, and I wanna do that something that will blow your mind. Do you know the things you do to me? Judge me and I'll make you understand.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being patient. A little bit of news that we do have here in this game. It is going to be Benji stepping in for SOT in this game here up against the Atlantis Leviathans. So, all the discussion that we did have about SOT and how he can make some kind of a change up here for the Titans in this matchup. Well, now, Trelly, we can go ahead and talk about what we have talked about, at least as far as past matchups with this team. Now, as Benji's going to be stepping back in, we have the actual hard data of Benji versus Yarkor over into that solo lane, but still imagine it's going to be a lot of similarities that we saw even a couple months back.
Yeah, like we said, now it's a true Worlds rematch, as we mentioned before. I was going to say, you know, that it's going to be a little bit to overcome, but now that's all thrown out the door at this point. It's more so just, you know, can Benji rise to the occasion this time around, and it's going to be a good one.
We'll see how Benji can step in here with the Titans once again. Now, picks and bans for game number 1, ready to go between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans. As you say, Benji now stepping in for the role on that solo lane, at least for this game here. Atlantis Leviathans will be the first pick, and their first ban is going to be Khepri. This is a god that we've been seeing a massive rise on. I mean, every time I ask Mifflin, it's basically just the who can ever be, you know, who can ever be against a Scarab's blessing with so much there. But in particular, Aurora is one of those players in this league who really loves flexing over to this pick.
Yeah, I'm loving Aurora just because of his play style right now, where he can go these aggressive Guardians. You know, he can go the Atlases and dash in and also get all just crazy amounts of CC and sustain in that lane and that sort of thing. But also, his Khepri is getting panned out. You know, it's a completely opposite side of the spectrum where it's more so I'm going to play very safe. I'm going to make sure my carries are okay. I'm going to set up for some early CC. But it's a completely different play style, and Aurora can, you know, master them both pretty well.
There will be an Artio in response here for the Tartarus Titans. Absolutely no surprise this god has become, once again, a top pick, top ban for just about every single team here in the SPL, especially against former Worlds MVP on one of his World Championship gods here. That's why we're going to be seeing a ban like that here out of Tartarus Titans. Not wanting to give that one away because a lot of teams have been opting to take that god as a first pick as of now, Trelly.
Yeah, Artio just extremely safe in lane, has crazy amounts of CC. The main issue that I find that letting this Artio through is what do you pick into it, right? You know, we've seen the Cerberus as sort of an answer, trying to steal his way some of that healing, but the amount of lockdown that this Artio has is just really annoying to deal with, and most people just say, I don't want to give Artio up. I don't want to face into that. I don't want to lane into that, especially as a carry with a dash that you're getting crippled out, that sort of thing. You just want to remove that from the fact, so ban it away.
Yeah, going to take that one away there, as well as the Khepri, as we talked about earlier on, a god that really both these supports can go towards. And that seems to be what a lot of the name is against these two teams more often than not. You know, it's hard to really ban out full-on mid laners. You take away maybe a pick or two. Junglers, they can flex themselves out here. Maybe the Gilgamesh, kind of the common thread between these two, you can take out. So there always does seem to be, at least against the Titans and Leviathans, maybe a little bit more focus on these frontline bans.
Yeah, I would say so. Pretty much right now, the only thing you really want to ban away in that mid lane, I would say, is Zeus. Unless you're first pick, most people are saying, hey, we will take the Zeus. Everyone right now, if you're in the mid lane, you got to have a Zeus or at least know how to play at this point. So taking away that Zeus, probably the only real mid lane ban you want to expend at the moment, just to make sure, you know, not getting insane amounts of that AoE damage in these team fights. Of course, the early shield toss, such great clear as well.
We have a very slight delay getting into the picks and bans here on game number 1. We're trying to get back into those as quick as we can here between these two matchups. And let's talk a little bit more about Paul and Shinto for this mid lane one. You know, we talk about how Paul is a player that you can't really ban up against. Shinto kind of in that same vein here. They share a lot of similarities in their god pools. I mean, we both know that they can grab out the Thoths if need be. They can go back and pull out the Zeuses. It's been a very common pick, honestly, between those two with that Zeus. I mean, last week alone, Zeus was 100% pick ban rate. You imagine we'll even get a chance to even talk about the Zeus in this set.
I mean, I have to assume it's going to be banned away, right? Like I mentioned, if you're not first pick, giving away that Zeus is just... Zeus went from being this immobile mage, right? Like sort of an Anubis, right? Where he's got crazy damage, but also he can't move, so people don't want to pick him. Nowadays, with this sort of influx of the hybrid build, where you have the Legion Helm, the Void Stone, that sort of thing, Zeus is surviving the team fight. He's able to do crazy amounts of damage, and he's able to live through the fact, as well as having this early pressure. So right now, Zeus is no longer that immobile threat. Maybe it could just be because of the shield toss buff, where you do get that attack speed, you get that movement speed when the shield's down, and I guess that enough was able to bring Zeus back into the meta pretty hard.
Yeah, that initial downside of him being that immobile threat. Now that the threat is actually on the enemy team because he's so immobile, it makes him a juicy target for so many of these junglers to jump in. I mean, we saw a lot of the tank Circuit kind of be the answer to it, but now we're seeing a lot less of tank Circuit. We're seeing a lot less of tank Fenrir. So a lot of these gods that were able to get to Zeus and really deal with that kind of damage are starting to fall out of the meta here, though we are still seeing lights of Gilgamesh, Erlang Shen, to maybe be able to deal with that here. And those are two picks that Layers really does love going to here for the Titans.
Yeah, it's very true. The Erlang and the Gilgamesh, two sides of a similar coin, I will say, where Erlang a little bit stronger in the early game, whereas Gilgamesh gets that Bumbus Hammer online a little bit stronger in that late game. If you are going to let one of them through, you usually try to make sure you're in that first pick slot so you can't get the counter pick. They're just very strong, and as you mentioned, Phantom and Layers both like this Gilgamesh and the Erlang pick respectively. So I wouldn't doubt to see at least one of those banned away and then at least, you know, answered back for a counter pick.
Yeah, I mean, as we are in the top end of the playing field here of the spectrum in the Pro League, a lot of these players do have a lot of parity between their god picks. These two teams in particular share a lot of similarities between their junglers and even over to their mid laners. But talking about their supports as well, I mean, we haven't talked about the dual lane very much. Rongyu and Aurora, both known for going over towards this Atlas pick. It's something that I believe only Genetics outside of these two players has opted to try and go out for here. But this Atlas has been making massive impacts in just about every single game that he's made it through, Trelly.
Hey, Inbound did steal a Gold Fury with Atlas. So
oh, yeah, that's
it was
right.
from across the map. So there is a lot of these support players right now are figuring out how solid the Atlas pick is. As you mentioned, the Yamoja, still pretty popular in that support role. I think both of these players value that pick as well. So it really just depends on what the mood is. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get early pressure in that support lane? Are you trying to go for like a Horus, maybe get some crazy amounts of lockdown, that sort of thing? It really just depends. And as you mentioned, Rongyu and Aurora both have similar styles, but also have a couple different options there.
We're able to get back in here now. Picks and bans for game number 1 should be good to go here between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans. Same first two bans that we saw earlier on. Obviously, that's not going to be changing up the Kepri and the Ardio. We've talked about those two specifically. Kleena has been a god that's made her way up to the top of the rankings for both of these teams, whether you throw her in that solo or in that jungle. Gotta imagine if you're the Tartarus Titans here, you're probably not wanting to give that pick over to the Leviathans.
Yeah, I would say so. Right now, Kleena, especially because of how Panatom was able to end game 2 versus the Oni Warriors there. You don't want to give Panatom this Kleena. Just so much movement, so much unpredictable damage by playing through the walls, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't doubt I don't think the Leviathans would ever ban it. They have first pick here. They have the option, but they are going to take away that Erlang Shen, which I wouldn't be surprised now if we see a Gilgamesh ban in return.
Yeah, Gilgamesh could be the easy answer back here for the Titans. Bastet still notable as a god that can be jumping up here as far as favorability between those gods. We haven't seen a lot of flexibility with her between the jungle and the solo lane, though as we've been getting a little bit further here in the SPL specifically, we've been seeing a lot less of her going over towards the solo lane more often than not now in the jungle. But you did call it right here, Trelly. Right after the year long, it is going to be a Gilgamesh ban out of the Titans.
Yeah, the Zeus is still on the table, and I do think that the Titans have to take it away here, or they're going to have to learn to deal with it. There is a chance that maybe Paul says, hey, we could just counter with the Thoth, and I could just outrange the heck out of Shinto, but still, I think it's going to be difficult to deal with. They are going to take away that cleanest, so the Zeus is open. The Leviathans probably going to think about this one for just a second and then decide what they want. The Yamoja, though, they are going to put a lot of stock into getting Rongyu on this crazy amount of sustain and just control on this Guardian.
Yeah, going to make sure they get their support pick up first here on the side of the Atlantis Leviathans. And a pick that we've talked a lot about when it comes to Rongyu. I mean, this god and Rongyu's name are synonymous in the league at being that top level of play. But it's going to be a Kabrakan as the first pick out of the Titans. So neither of these teams looking at that Zeus, not putting that same level of stock that we saw into it earlier on in the week, earlier on last week as well. Instead, it will be AMC. 7 games played on this god and a 71% win rate. A very strong performance out of this Hunter here in Season 9.
Yeah, crazy amounts of pressure with this AMC. But one pick that did weasel its way through that we've been seeing banned quite a lot is that Daji. Daji been banned a large portion of just pretty much any set right now, not just because of the fact that you're picking characters with no CCMU ults like this AMC, like the Kabrakan, for example. And there it is. The Daji is going to be the answer back. Whenever this AMC comes out, that has to be the thought process, right? You think about, are we able to stay safe in this lane? Is there, this Pala that can just pull me back in despite my positioning? And right now, the answer is yes. It looks like Panatom was going to get that Daji.
Well, just looking back at the stats, at least for Rongyu on this Umoja specifically, 17 times in Season 8, the Leviathans were able to get that pick for Rongyu, 15 of those being wins, so only 2 losses on that god as of Season 8. We'll see if that pans out for them this time around. Daji Ho Yi, the 2 picks for the Atlantis Leviathans. That gives Titans one more option. Now this AMC, we've seen the flexibility whether he goes in towards the dual lane or the mid. But now with it locked in, up against the Daji, up against this Ho Yi, Charlie, is there a spot that you would rather have this AMC going towards?
Yeah, it really depends. Obviously, if you are going to take this AMC mid, you're pretty much going to get pressure for free. You're going to have much better clear than most of the mid lane mages that you're up against. But on the flip side, that Palau is always going to be a threat. I mean, Daji is going to be in that mid 3v3 fight, constantly trying to pull you. You have to maybe even get a Magi, so just position very far under your tower to try and be safe in that mid lane. So one thing that I will say is, because Leviathans let that Zeus through, now they just have the Daji, and it's like, do you want to pick Zeus into that at the moment? Daji probably the best counter to Zeus, I will say. Once that Lightning Storm goes down, I mean, it's easy to get to Zeus, but can you kill him? And that's looks like the answer back is, we're going to go for a Guardian and a double ADC comp for the Tartarus Titan, so this more than likely will be that AMC mid.
Yeah, Medusa. We did see a little bit of flex towards mid, but we'll see exactly where this AMC/Medusa combo ends up going through. As the bans start coming through, Tartarus Titans will take the Zeus off the table, so they will not give that one over to Shinto. So finally, we'll see the God of Lightning taken out here. This Kabrakan pick, though, a lot of flexibility with it. We've been seeing some games of its support. We've seen a lot of games jungle as of recent, and we've even seen some solo, specifically out of Yarkor, here over into the Pro League. Is there a spot that you imagine this slot's maybe better for the Titans here?
Yeah, I mean, the Kabrakan jungle I usually throw some more favor to just because of his one-shot potential, but as I believe I asked Mifflin about it long ago, he doesn't really appreciate this glass cannon style build because, yeah, you can one-shot late game, but also you're going to get one-shot late game. On the flip side, that hybrid build that you can go for where you have a good amount of damage but also some survivability is going to do Kabrakan pretty solid. But again, as you mentioned, the solo lane Kabrakan still does have some success there, so it really just depends. The Leviathans are holding on to that solo pick, so maybe just keeping this Kabrakan as a flex in the moment until you see the matchup.
Well, trying to get rid of some of the range damage here are the Tartarus Titans. The Zeus earlier on in the first ban of this second phase, and now Thoth. God, that we saw a lot of success on yesterday, at least in the hands of Pagon with the Jade Dragon. So not going to let that one through are the Tartarus Titans. Meanwhile, on the other side, it is a Fafnir ban. So the Leviathans aren't fully set on this Kabrakan going over to the support role. They're going to at least take one of those ones away, but also still not exactly sure where this Kabrakan is going to go at all, so they're going to take in a Wheelish ban here. And maybe a bit of a wise one. Ho Yi against the Wheelish is never a fun matchup for Ho Yi.
Yeah, I would say so. And we know that players does like that a Wheelix pick. So if it is going to be, I mean, now it looks more so like the Cthulhu in the solo lane, and Kabrakan still could be support, but also could have that jungle option. I mean, when you have double ADC, you usually are drafting a large amount of Guardians, try to fill in that magic damage role here, as the Morgan is going to be hovered here. They could steal away this Cthulhu transformation on the Morgan, but also double Palau, that seems pretty deadly as well.
Yeah, that double Palau is something we've seen time and time again with these two picks out here. We might not see it, at least just yet here, shying away from that Morgan. Will at least be a Bologna pick, though. The Morgan still can be picked here on the side of the Atlantis Leviathans. One more pick left, and that one will go towards the mid lane, but it won't be the Morgan. Instead, it's going to be a Tiamat for Shinto over in the mid lane. And now with the last pick over to the Titans, wherever this Kabrakan is going, we know Cthulhu over towards that solo lane. Charlie, we could be looking at a triple Guardian, double Hunter comp out of the Titans.
Yeah, that certainly could be the option, as Ymir is currently being hovered here. I don't see how much value the wall really gets. I was going to say I just don't see it, but I do see the value in some crazy cross-map prot shred in this Alice. Obviously, Aurora smiling that he got this pick here. He gets a lot of pressure in the dual lane, as we've touched on time and time again. And his second ability, that gravity pull, it's just insane amounts of CC, and it should be, honestly, it's equivalent to like a Fenrir roll, right? You're able to pick up so much. So Aurora being able to displace a lot and still a crazy amount of magical damage despite not having any mages on the Tartarus Titans.
Man, that just shows how much stock that there is in Fenrir's Ragnarok as a whole, where we have like now 2 other abilities in the game that are very similar. You got Bastet, who has a ranged Ragnarok with that Huntress of Bast, and now Atlas kind of considered a mini Ragnarok, as you can pick up more than one person even. And we've seen Aurora specifically pick up a couple of carries in some team fights, and that to throw them over to Cyclone Spin, and then they just get a nice and easy kill there. Though it is very difficult to pick up not just 1, but 2 carries in this instance here. But it is going to be triple Guardian, double Hunter out of the Titans, kind of an homage to some of the older metas that we'd seen in Smite, where you get this massive front line, and you just make sure that your backline have a lot of space. But do the Leviathans have the means to get that backline with this composition, Charlie?
Yeah, the question right now is who has that late game presence, because as we've talked about time and time again with the Leviathans, they value farming pretty effectively in the early stages of the game. Maybe they'll get a little bit behind, but that late game 5v5 is what they play for here and now. Are you wanting to let two ADCs get online for that late game team fight? Are you wanting to fight into a Medusa and an AMC that are full build? I would say probably not right now. So the Leviathan's going to have to get active early unless these double ADCs are going to get online.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of prot shred on this side of the Tartarus Titans, like you were talking about with the Atlas ult just as a starter. Then you have AMC with his Stinger, going to be able to shred a lot of that. So if these frontliners of the Leviathans can make it there between Paul and Cyclone Spin, they're going to have a lot of damage and shredability on their way here. So the Tartarus Titans, it sounds to me, Charlie, what you're going with here is that this is a team that wants to get to the late game. They want to stay alive early so that way they can find these big fights.
Yeah, that seems to be like the draft option here. I mean, you do have the Cabrakan, you do have the Cthulhu who are not afraid of getting active early game. Obviously, Cabrakan will be able to find some solid gank options here, but I think that was the reason that Shinto said, give me the Tiamat. I'm going to have some safety. I'm able to jump over the Cabrakan walls. Tiamat, arguably one of the tankier mages in the mid lane and lots of survivability there. So I think the Leviathan saw what the draft was and sort of adapted to it, obviously with the Bologna as well. Into double ADC, the Scourge going to be very effective in these team fights.
Yeah, I mean, that quadrupedal stance that comes out of Tiamat does provide her a lot of tankiness. And that's when, as the late games come through, that's when we've really seen a lot of the success that Tiamat has brought to some of these teams. I mean, the Kings, they take their games usually 30-plus minutes. The Leviathans are no strangers to going to these later games, and that's where Tiamat's damage numbers do end up coming out. But Trelly, looking here over at the side, you know, Cthulhu, the big talking point as far as being able to kill them here. Do the Leviathans have the tools to be able to take down a god like Cthulhu? We might have to hold up on that one and talk to him more about in the game. Game number 1 between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans are ready to go here in our first match of the day. It's the match of the week. Let's start right over to Dulcet and Mifflin.
Leviathans versus Titans, your SPL match of the week, and how different the standings could look depending on the way that this set goes. Leviathans 1-1 here in Season 9 right now, Mifflin. The Titans off to a great start. And imagine this, the Atlantis Leviathans, defending world champions. You get off to potentially a 1-2 start. That'd be unheard of in my opinion if this set ends up going that way. Would be a unique look though, because I think worth mentioning, out of the solo lane, Benji, the coach for the Titans, filling in for SOT here in this matchup. You're in a pretty good spot if your solo lane fill-in is Benji.
Look, do we have any confirmation on why it is that Benji's playing today? Do we know?
Don't bait me like that. No idea, Miff. No idea. Benji's going to be playing out of the solo lane though here in this set. And
did you shout out Rosie yet?
No, I had not yet. That's right. Mifflin, myself, and Rosie will be spectating for us all day today. And I believe tomorrow, and that means Doug will be on replays for us. So Doug's still involved in some capacity, but happy to have Rosie with us here for these broadcasts. And what a game to start off our Saturday here with, Miff. The Atlantis Leviathans, the Tartarus Titans.
Whoa.
It's our first instance of the World's Finals rematch. These two teams played at the end of the kickoff tournament. Zapman sticks around for a little more damage. These two teams played in the finals of that kickoff tournament, but our first official SPL matchup, rematch of the World's Finals.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. It's a different look at the Tartarus Titans as well. The desk does a very good job of highlighting it. Triple Guardian, triple frontline essentially, with a double Hunter composition. And even if you do decide to itemize towards some of that physical defense, you've got an AMC to shred that away. Decent targets for them to look towards on the Leviathans, namely Rongyu, probably not going to be very safe on this Yamoja. Yarkor will, to an extent, need to play safely, but, you know, disarm very good into double Hunter.
Whoa, Paul dashed at by Panatom and
done.
Shinto. The body blocks are good. And Shinto snags first blood. There's just no mana, no mobility. The immobile AMC punished for first blood.
Man, look, I know Shinto loves getting all the farm, but that was a legitimate moment where I saw him think to himself, I'm going to hold this ability to make sure I get the last hit. So early first blood for Shinto. It's going to put him significantly ahead, especially considering who he kills, the enemy mid laner, Paul. And Paul playing a god that really cannot afford to fall this early. You want that Transcendence on first back, no longer an option. 0-1 only has a tier 2. Going to be a good while to can start stacking that one up.
And I mean, look at the Leviathans draft, and we'll give due credit to the Titans draft. It's a unique look and a strong look once you get to the late game and you get these hunters spooled up. But you're in a draft now where the Leviathans get Shinto on Tiamat, one of his strongest picks, one of the strongest mid laners in the league, if not the strongest, on one of their strongest picks. And Rongyu gets Yemoja here. I think those two together, Miff, I imagine the pressure of this game as it goes on. Then, of course, we've already seen a little of Panatom on Taji. But those two picks with those two players specifically, I think just carry a little extra weight here in the SPL.
Throughout the entirety of the last season, Rongyu allowed to play this Yemoja 17 times and only lost twice. There's a reason it was only 17. It's because enemies were banning it out so consistently. He is so consistent on this pick, and it brings a lot for this entirety of a team. That said, there are some answers to the Yemoja. I'm keeping my eyes on potentially the engage potential of the Tartarus Titans. If they're starting off the fights more often than not, we might see Rongyu limited to using that River's Rebuke as a disengage tool or as just a counter engage. If Rongyu's allowed to be the aggressor in some of these fights, not many answers to escape that cage, barring some phantom shells. Shantum Fells.
Shantum Fells.
It's early, all right?
That is, Miff, we are well into the afternoon.
I'm a gamer.
Yeah, right. It's first thing in the morning for you, Miff. You're right. Paul without beads here for the first 40 or for the next 45 seconds. Panatom hovering close to mid, and so immobile and without beads. You know, small windows of opportunity for Panatom to maybe get something else going over towards the mid lane. But Paul will hover around Aurora. He's piloting Atlas, and Aurora made no mistake. Rongyu throws up the River's Rebuke, but where's the help? This is just Rongyu. You get the double stun, and the amount of pressure from Rongyu forces a disengage from the Tartarus Titan. Stinger goes out, but Paul, Aurora, and Cyclone Spin backing away towards the purple buff. The Riptide is perfect. Panatom holds onto the Powwow, and it looks like we'll disengage, but Layers has got something else in mind. Sends some damage towards Panatom, who connects a chain onto two, and there's big burst damage on the other side. Panatom has knocked down another. Aurora pulls the first kill of the game for the Tartarus Titans. Double Petrify means nothing when Zapman's able to jump in, and Aurora will be the final hit, and Zapman's got a double. The Leviathans have come to play in the first 5 minutes.
4-1, immediately gold, immediately swings as well. The Leviathans have got a massive lead, and all off the back of Rongyu just walking up on his own, essentially in a 1 versus 2. No fight back potential from the Tartarus Titans. They try to disengage towards their own purple buff. Not allowed with all the Leviathans on your heels, and the re-engage was so strong. I was concerned for Layers' target allocation there. He uses both of his stuns very early up against Panatom, and Panatom says, word, well, you don't have beads, so I'm going to pull you in, and you don't have any of your stuns available, so he can channel that Thousands Cuts fully. And you saw what Panatom was able to do with that space. 4 out of 4 kill participation for the jungler of the Leviathans.
Yeah, same for the mid laner as well. Shinto already underway in this build. Divine Ruin into likely will be another flat pen item after the Divine Ruin. Paul needs a little bit of time now. Stack up this Transcendence. Again, there's always going to be the late game threat with this double Hunter composition, but the Leviathans calling them on it, calling the Titans on it, and making plays happen early before that damage really winds up. We did see Layers put a massive amount of damage into Panatom, so you're going to have some burst magic damage despite the way this composition is built from the Titans. And with Blink, maybe you feel like Layers has got to carry a little extra weight here early in this game if on this Cabrakan pick.
Yeah, it looks like he might be going towards that one-shot style of build. Point of correction for the desk. I like the one-shot build, by the way, despite what Trelly says about
me. Yeah, you
me.
couldn't defend yourself.
Yeah, he threw some dirt on my name. I don't think building defense is cool in general. If I could remove it from the game, I would. So, going for Spear of Desolation in that first slot, going to get those stuns up and available a lot more often. And if you do go for that one-shot style, you're going to benefit from that CDR, from the passive of Spear of Desolation. Already on relatively short cooldowns, are Cabrakan's first and second ability. So I'm very excited to see how he itemizes going further onward. I'm expecting a Polynomicon, some more flat penetration items, even potentially a Divine Ruin, just for the stats. He's not the greatest applicator. Tremor's his largest ability, but you're not really channeling that if you're going for a squishy style of build. I'm very curious to see how Layers plays this one, but considering he doesn't have beads, seems like safety, not really his MO.
Yeah, we already saw Panatom get a double pull, and that was followed up by burst damage from Shinto, and the rest of the fight just went the way of the Leviathans. Zapman gets a couple of kills in that opening fight for the left side of the map, and he's got a unique build here, Miff. Crusher, standard for Cyclone Spin on the other side. Devourer's Gauntlet into some bow item is what Zapman's got in mind here. Feels a little Season 70, early Season 8 maybe before we transitioned out of this style of build, but I guess when you got enough gold after a couple of kills, maybe Zapman sees the value.
Yeah, these OG Hunter players will find any excuse.
Are you calling them old?
Yes, legitimately yes. But all these OG Hunter players will look for any excuse to buy Devourer's Gauntlet. It is a very fun item, a great infusion of power, stacking as well. You get some good lifesteal. You don't really need to start itemizing in towards that Aussie, which allows you to open up your build a little bit more so to standard penetration items. I'm curious to see where Zatman goes from here with this build. Generally, when I see the Devourer's Gauntlet, it's on these gods that are more so about using stims, attack speed stim gods, the guys that are going to be boxing with auto attacks more often. I don't think Hou Yi is one of those. He's generally, hey, I'm going to throw out the Mark of the Crow, I'm going to stun you, I'm going to drop my ultimate, and maybe I'll land 2 or 3 auto attacks if I need to afterward.
Well, Cyclone Spin already a couple of levels behind, maybe a level and a half after this wave goes down. So Zatman, of course, in a pretty commanding spot over on the left side of the map. Aurora still finds himself 1 level ahead of Wrong You. That being said, we know how much Aurora likes this Atlas pick. Considers the pull in and the stun almost a mini Fenrir ultimate, and you get to use it on cooldown where you have to wait for the ultimate to come back up if you're Fenrir. And Aurora, I can never tell with Aurora. He was what I gather is he was not kidding. When we did the team check-in, Aurora was talking about how support feels like the most broken in a strong way, role in the game right now. And so Aurora, by his own admission, should be in a spot to impact these games. How about this? The Titans a little bit behind, though. Gold Fury pulled.
Surely
Wrong
not.
You.
Great wall.
Will not steal it away, but it's a 4-man Rivers Rebuke. Woo! And this is exactly what happened last time. Now Shinto wraps around the corner, but it's Aurora finding the first kill of the fight. Yet again, both of the Titans kills on their support. Zatman re-engages. Ultimate down. Double beads burnt. Panatom has already snagged a kill onto layers. Aurora does not have beads, and Panatom has Pal-Out. Up he goes. 1 chain good. 2 chains good. Double pull. Big fight. Leviathans. They don't care about the Fury. They'll win the fight after.
Benji has made the rotation. Descends into madness. Will make Panatom pay for that double kill. And well, Zatman stuck in no man's land.
Zatman's level 11 and Benji is low. Has Mark of the Golden Crow on him. Gets the stun. Zatman sticks around. He can outbox Cyclone Spin surely, and both have to dash away. Red health bars on the other side of a Deicide. Leviathans grab 3. They lose Panatom, but the Titans do get the Fury. But what a fight from the Leviathans. Wrong You has thrown caution to the wind. And the fact that Wrong You only has 2 assists at the end of all of this feels so unfair. 7 kills for the Leviathans, and Wrong You, quote, has only impacted 2 of them, despite being at the forefront of all the initiations.
Yeah, he started off every single fight we've seen for the Leviathans with an ultimate on his own. Had he had a little bit more help earlier on, probably survives, but that is a double-edged sword. It's going to give the rest of his team a fair bit more farm. They're not splitting nearly as much with Wrong You, but has put Wrong You an entire level, maybe a level and a half behind.
Pyromancer being chipped away by the Titans. So, neutral objective control has been all for the Tartarus Titans at the onset of this game. Gold Fury and Pyromancer has kept this gold gap a lot closer than it otherwise might be. Only 1.3, 1.4K. Experience, though, still heavily in favor of the Leviathans. Zatman far enough ahead. He's probably feeling confident to take some boxing fights with Cyclone Spin, who will dash away. What happens here? That's a big collapse in the mid lane. Paul goes down. And Miff, we have just seen this AMC punished constantly. The mindset of the Leviathans has put pressure around mid. Beads are down. Paul is dead. 0-3 now on the AMC.
Yeah, I don't even think that cost Wrong You his ultimate. I don't think it was back up just yet.
No.
75%, so that may have just been raw damage output and great timing for the Leviathans, syncing it up with that red buff respawn. Cyclone Spin and Layers only get to look on as the Leviathans strip the entirety of the jungle. Luckily for the Tartarus Titans, not much the Leviathans can do with this map state lead. Maybe we see the Leviathans put some pressure onto these tier 1s in mid, already about a half HP in the duo lane.
What do you mean? They could drain the obelisk.
They could drain the obelisk, I guess. It's not worth as much as it once was, but if the Camelot Kings are any indicator, it is one way to push your gold lead even further.
That's true. You're right. Titans, by their own well-controlled map state, to your point there, Miff, have taken away options from the Leviathans. Wonder if we see a collapse here onto Panatom. We sure do. Beads get used. No Pal-Out in, and Paul finally gets a kill on board instead of a death, but Shinto can run down Layers here on the right side of this fight. Paul locked in place. ER core on its rotation out of the solo lane. Make something happen. Eagles rally in. Double Rivers Rebuke. And now the Titans funneled back in towards the damage. Cyclone Spin, big Petrify on the back
That's
line.
the dash.
And now the Titans able to fight back and might just turn this fight around. But Yarkor's got a triple kill. Suddenly Bologna out of the solo lane on a warpath as 3 are down. Titans will pick up 2.
Yark remembering everyone, or reminding them rather, why he's called the Shark. Just rotates in this team fight, double stun off the ultimate, and makes such a huge splash. Hard for a Bologna at this portion of the game to have a similar impact to a Descent into Madness Cthulhu, but I would argue that Yarkor creates even more space than what we saw from Benji. The damage output, the early Frostbound, actually bypassing Berserker Shield to finish off that Frostbound a little bit earlier, just really starts to add up. And now Yarkor's damage incredibly high, but even in picking up a triple kill for himself, only maintains parity with Benji on the other side, who has rotated a fair bit more. Surprised that there isn't a larger experience gap for the Leviathans in the solo.
I think Yarkor's done a good job here. Obviously, the triple kill, all of the affected kills that Yarkor has had here, so that's the one rotation now. But Benji has teleport, and so I thought the Yarkor has at least been able to mirror some of the impact that Benji has had, despite not having the teleport. I think props to Yarkor. But Benji, of course, really helps in that far left side purple buff fight that we saw on this side of the map a little bit ago. So both solo laners already have shown us why they are/were some of the best in their role in their time. And Benji apparently picking up right where he left off for the Titans here this game. It's been a lot of killing and dying for Panatom though so far this game, Miff, where the initiations have been there, but has traded out his own life a few times. 8 of the 11 affected kills there, but how about Shinto in the game that the Tiamat has put together? 11 out of 11 affected kills, with 2 of them in his own back pocket, 9 assists. A lot of this fighting happening around the mid lane.
And it's not as if Shinto's playing passively. It's not like he's playing a long-range artillery mage. He is getting involved. He's getting his hands dirty, even leading the charge right now as they start to move up towards Cyclone Spin. No threat on the mid laner. Level 15, 2 levels up on his opposition, highest in the game or tied for it. The Leviathans start the Oni Fury.
They will take it down. No pushback from the Titans. Leviathans, make no mistake on this one. Remember, the last 2 objectives, Gold Fury and Pyromancer, the first rotation of those 2 go over to the Titans pretty quietly. 1 fight happens after the Gold Fury. But the Leviathans probably feel like they're far enough ahead now where they need to be on time for those objectives and not give any easy routes back into the game for the Tartarus Titans. Because this one has started, we're not out of control yet, Miff, but if the Leviathans can keep this pace going, we're right on the edge of it. Though the gap has closed up a little bit, Cyclone Spin had been 2 levels behind. It's really the mid right now where I feel like a lot of pressure lies for the Atlantis Leviathans. In the jungle as well, Panatom has just been a little bit more impactful than Layers, who has fallen a couple of levels behind there as well. But you go Spear of Deso into Stone of Binding if you're Layers here, Miff, and so you are trying to set up, I assume, for a lot of that extra damage after the fact, trying to smooth over the fact that you've got a Hunter in mid.
You also get the benefit from Stone of Binding yourself. He's always initiating these fights with stuns. The Cyclone Spin may be caught out here.
Oh, the stun might not have connected from Zapman. Had it connected, I think Cyclone Spin is dead there. At least has to use the beads and the Aegis. Nearly on a couple of those ricochets. But Zapman knocks down the Tier 1 tower on the left side of the map. Literal 0 damage has connected on the Tier 1 tower on the Leviathans duo lane. And so that gives you a good idea of where this pressure has been flowing. Mid lane about to fall as well. Though Benji had stuck around and has had enough presence in that lane to grab a tower of his own. And so the Leviathans, maybe one concerted push here in mid-Miff can knock down this Tier 1.
Take a peek at Zapman's build. We get to check back in yet again.
Yeah,
Atalanta's immediately gets some of that crit chance online very early. Just a phenomenal stat stick in general, but also going straight into the Wind Demon, as opposed to Cyclone Spin, who is forced to go towards that Aussie if he wants to have any sustain in these fights. That's a lot of crit early for the Leviathans. Maybe not the strongest build for shutting down a Cthulhu or an incredibly strong front line, but it is very good when you start to look towards these neutral objectives. Effectively, Zapman has said, hey, I don't really need this next item. I can go to a Pyromancer right now. I can go to a Fire Giant right now and get incredibly active.
Yeah, still in the bow tree after the Wind Demon then as well. Love what we've seen from Zapman. Every once in a while a game like this will happen for Zap where he's kind of hanging out in lane. The team is able to make some fights happen on that side of the map, and Zap just comes out absolutely swinging. Now, Zap is also not immune to a game where, you know, he gets heavily focused. He goes 0-3, 0-4, and his team ends up winning the game anyway. But But this is one of the reasons the Leviathans are such a threatening team is because Shinto can be 2-0-9, 2-1-9 as the Titans put all their eggs in that basket, get a knockdown onto the Tiamat for 45 seconds. But then you still have Zapman, who's so strong, and one can be having a bad game while the other's really stepping up. And I think you can say the same for the Titans. Paul and Cyclone Spin, a two-headed monster as far as the carry roll goes. But what can the Titans make happen off of that pick in mid? Pyromancer still stands. Is getting Shinto down. A 5v4, enough of an advantage? Titans seem to think so.
Yeah, and they should. It cost Shinto his beads. One of the latest beads I've ever seen. Shinto essentially calling the bluff, saying, hey, you're not going to commit, and he was wrong. It was an easy commitment for the Tartarus Titans. All ultimates still available, and still 10 seconds left on the mid laner's respawn. Do Pyro, force a fight, try and put the Leviathans on the back foot.
Wow, Pyromancer gets reset here. Cautious around the Pyro, wrong you. Sent back towards layers, but Zapman's rotated out of the duo lane, and it's a big-time ultimate from the Hoagie, but Benji, he's found the first. Layers pulled back against the Palau. Zapman, aggressive positioning here, has left himself alone in the back line. And finally, a Petrify will knock down Zap, as Cyclone Spin will use his Aegis, buy himself some time, dodges out the uptown from Yarkor, and sends some auto attacks to Bologna's way. And look at what the Titans have done. They turn a pick on a Shinto into a 3-for-1 fight.
Paul low HP, but Shinto cannot stick around, not with 4 members of the Tartarus Titans right around this corner. Tier 1 tower should go to the Titans, but not much afterward, unless Shinto gets caught out again. Drop down to 20%, but that should spell the end of this engagement. The Tartarus Titans do a great job just creating threat, just generating something on the map that the Leviathans have to answer. This time, it's the Pyromancer. The Leviathans step a little bit out of line. Panatom gets a phenomenal ultimate, but considering what he was standing in with that Palau, lands into a Tremors, lands into a Cabrakan cage, can't really move around too much. Even Aurora gets a fully channeled ultimate, shredding all that defense, and the Tartarus Titans able to turn around that engagement very easily and immediately transition into the fire.
Well, the Relic situation is a bit of a graveyard at the moment. Blink is there for layers, and Aegis for Shinto, and Bracer for Wrong You. Everything else is down on cooldown. Are you surprised, Myth? I gotta admit, I'm a little surprised the Leviathans wanted to step up in a 4v5 to defend the Pyromancer. Maybe the threat of the Fire Giant was enough to pull the Leviathans to that side of the map anyway? But you're missing Shinto, who's maybe one of the strongest members on your team. The fact the Leviathans were willing to take a fight there was maybe interesting.
Well, considering what the initiation looks like from the Leviathans, I think it was a, hey, I might be able to find a pull with Palau, and maybe we find a pick immediately afterward, and then we'll disengage, but they got caught out by the Tartarus Titans, similarly having massive levels of chain CC between this triple Guardian front line. It seems like the Leviathans just weren't privy to it. The damage output wasn't quite there. Zapman got a little bit unlucky with his crits. The Tartarus Titans turn the fight.
Primal Fury's low here. Aurora and Benji are close by, and Primal Fury gets taken by the Leviathans, but Aurora made things interesting. Zapman and the rest of the crew take a deep breath. Those Ricochet that ends up confirming it. And this game was largely brought back towards even. Still very, very close after some good fighting from the Tartarus Titans. 1.7k gold now where the Leviathans find themselves in the lead after confirming the Fury. But, you know, I was unsure of what Titans we would get after the Leviathans pulled far and away ahead just a few moments ago. And I admire the strength and the ability of this Titans team to make a pick and then turn around a fight like that and give themselves a real good chance here in this game.
And we're starting to get to the portion of the match that the Tartarus Titans were aiming for initially. This is a team fight composition. They want to play as a 5-stacked death ball, so I'm not surprised to see him group up on the Fire Giant, force a response.
They can shred objectives. Fire Giant is low and burning quickly. Benji, though, has taken a lot of damage already at the beginning of this fight. Wrong You throws up River's Rebuke as he's done all game long, but the rest of the Leviathans aren't there to capitalize this time. Beads burnt off of layers, and Palau will find the beads, but not much else. River's Rebuke down. Aurora waiting on his ultimate to come back, but some big team fighting ultimates now missing for the Leviathans. See if the Titans want to force the issue.
Rare whiff there from Panatom. Doesn't connect the ultimate on a Cyclone Spin, so the ADC of the Titans maintains both forms of CC immunity, ultimate and beads, still available. And the Leviathans have to sit on their hands, wait for some of these huge cooldowns to come back up. The Tartarus Titans, they can do whatever they want.
They can force it. This would be a 5 versus 5. 4 versus 5 right now because Shinto is over in mid. And look at how fast the Fire Giant is going down. Cyclone Spin can shred. Paul can shred. Benji can set up. Can you buy space for your ADC? Shinto dodges out the stun with the beads, and now Layers is in a bad spot at the front line of this fight, but the wall funnels all the Leviathans right into range. But Shinto happy to turn around the damage. Zapman on the right side of the fight has already gotten one. Up, down onto Cyclone Spin for the double. Now Paul backpedaling away, uses the beads, but Yarkor is on the chase, and we are running for the hills. The Leviathans have already found 3. There should be a 4th around the corner, and Rongyu's the one who gets it.
Zapman absolutely gets MVP for that fight. Barring a literal physical wall, that ultimate from Zap, raining the suns in the middle of that engagement, was the best answer the Leviathans could have had. It forced a walk forward. Cyclone Spin has to walk through those suns, loses out on 50% of his HP just so he can get involved on the initiation from the Tartarus Titans. It was an all-in commitment. Once Benji and Aurora are so deep in that backline, they need follow-up regardless. Great disengage from Zapman. Phenomenal play.
Leviathans are not strangers to this either, holding the Fire Giant for a very, very long time to get all their teammates the buff. In 2 seconds, Panatom will be back. Panatom will snag the FG as well. Another fight where Panatom found a decent initiation at the beginning, ends up falling for his troubles, and the rest of the team capitalizes. Zapman has stepped up big in these last couple of fights. Damage hasn't been overwhelming, but it's been space controlling. Whereas on the flip side, Shinto has really made an impact. 18,000 damage for the Tiamat at near full build. Looks like Soul Gem is going to round out the build. And then you compare that to what Paul has done, about 8,000 damage behind is Paul on this AMC. And with the build that Paul has, though, Miff, even at 2 and 5, you got Transcendence Crusher, Titan's Bane, and Shin Size. You've diversified some ability damage, some auto attack shred there as well. Regardless of KDA, I don't think you can still count out Paul and in this AMC later on into this game on a defense.
And on defense is another place the Tartarus Titans draft is going to have some decent strides. I'm taking my eyes towards Layers in particular, who's going to have a much easier time connecting onto high priority targets. Game simplifies in a base defense situation. You know Zapman, where he's going to be, what his range is. If they are, the Leviathans that is, initiating onto a Phoenix, Zapman is going to be 55 units away from that Phoenix. That is the range of an auto attack, and well, that's pretty easy for Layers to close gap with a Blink ultimate or a Blink stun. Similarly, Aurora can control a lot of space with the Astrolabe toss out. Benji with the Sentinel Madness probably doesn't want to line up against a triple crit Zapman, but still can start to find some value there. Separate these engagements. That said, on the other side, it also becomes easier for Panatom to land some of these powwows. Keep your eyes on it.
Could this be the final fight of the game as the Leviathans have wrestled control from the onset? The Titans had some pushback, but then a massive Fire Giant fight. Great positioning from the veteran and Zapman, and aggression from the rest of the Leviathans bought some space. Looks like tier 2 tower is all this team has in mind. Still 1 tower remaining in mid and right, so some time for the Leviathans to take a breather, but these towers will fall down quickly, and you've got 2 minutes left on this Fire Giant buff. Ronyu and Yarkor are going to be difficult to kill off here, Miff. When Yarkor earlier on gets a triple kill, is now itemized into little anti-crit, so Cyclone Spin will be pinging off both Yarkor and Ronyu. Not quite as heavily. And that's been where a lot of the strengths have lied for this. I don't know, for this Leviathans team.
There's a word there.
You get the idea. And that's Yarkor and Ronyu. And their ability just to walk forward. Rongyu's been alone so often in this game, and it's worked out. And so keep your eyes on these tanks.
So far, 4-1 split, no, 3-2 rather. 3 in mid, 2 in left. Just trying to separate this engagement, removing the main strength of the Tartarus Titans draft. It's that 5-on-5. Can't do it when you're split pushing.
Yarkor taking a little bit of damage from Layers here. That Spear of the Magus helps amplify a little bit of damage.
Stinger gone.
Ronyu must have eaten the Stinger with where that health bar is, down to about half HP. But Cyclone's been low as well. How about this from Panatom? Don't need to be a frontliner to initiate, not when you're a Tashi. What is that damage on the back line? Shinto must have hit something big. Zapman's in there as well. Layers being melted through. Zapman can't quite connect on the ultimate, but can connect on the auto attack. Zapman and Shinto, the carries, getting it done for the Leviathans, and suddenly it's all down to Cyclone Spin and Benji. Benji is zoned out of this fight. The rest of the Leviathans have eyes on the mid-Phoenix.
Benji still has his ultimate. The Tartarus Titans need that Descent into Madness if they want to win out on an engagement. Luckily, can at least use it to defend this Titan.
The chance is small, but there is a chance. Yarkor, Ronyu, Zapman, and Shinto will walk into the Titan room. Cyclone Spin backpedals into his fountain. The Leviathans have the damage. Can they put it in the right place? Yes, they can. Shinto's on a killing spree. Down goes the Titan, and down go the Titans in game number 1.
The Leviathans get off to a quick start in this one. stumble a little bit towards the mid game. That gap gets closed up a fair bit. The Tartarus Titans, even in getting to that late game portion, I believe 22 minutes in, the gold lead was roughly 4,000. That is negligible at that portion of the game. Still were not allowed to use the main strength of their composition. They were not allowed to be that 5-on-5 death ball because the Leviathans were separating the fights. They were making sure that artificially manufactured 3v3s or 2v2s were happening on the map constantly. That's hard to play against. Effectively just removing the strength of the Titans draft.
Yeah, the Leviathans, you know, every once in a while you'll get these matchups, like maybe 50% of the time you get a game where like either Shinto or Zap is having a rough game, but the other's really stepping up. I feel like both carries for the Leviathans played out of their mind this game. The frontliners for the Leviathans were there, and then Panatom had some incredible engagements. The Leviathans firing on all cylinders in game number 1. Titans with a chance to punch back in game 2. Coming up next.
I promised I would wait for you, but I'm getting so impatient. Tell me that you're ready now. This room is big enough for two, and I wanna do that something that will blow your mind. Do you know the things you do to me? Touch me and I'll make you understand. Yeah. Do you know the things you make me feel? I can show you if you take my hand. I just wanna dance, dance, dance with you. Let me take you under where nobody can see. I just wanna dance, dance, dance with you. Harder than a sun. Put your hands on me. Put your hands on me, on me, on me. Put your hands on me, on me, on me. Put your hands on me, on me, on me. Put your hands on me, on me, Before you, I was paralyzed, all broken down from heartbreaks. Then you came and set me free. You've taken me to paradise, where nothing is a mistake, where we move so flawlessly. Do you know the things you do to me? Touch me and I'll make you understand. Yeah. Do you know the things you make me feel? I can show you if you take my hand. I just wanna dance, dance, dance with you. Let me take you under.
Well, welcome back to the SPL. The Atlantis Leviathans able to find a win here in game number 1 over the Tartarus Titans. Started out pretty strong here for Leviathans. A little bit of a falter there in that mid-game around that Fire Giant. The Tartarus Titans were able to find a nice couple of picks there and somewhat slow down the pace of the Leviathans, but it wasn't enough because at the end of it, it is the Atlantis Leviathans coming up with a 1-0 to start this set off. It's J-Mac and Trelly here. Tell me break down game number 1, but I mean, Leviathans basically never really lost control. It's the one team fight around Fire Giant that was kind of shaky, but then Zatman was able to rally the troops back up and take a win here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Leviathan style of play, right? We usually have been seeing this sort of, maybe we'll mess up at here and there the early game, but late game our team fight is going to be superior and we're going to come online. And it all really centered from Shinto and Yarkor. They were just, you can't give Shinto Tiamat, man. Even though it's not the best pick in the meta right now, it just seems like he's always going to be extremely safe and find huge leads. Just right here, 4-level lead over Paul just at 11 minutes.
I mean, what can you give Shinto? You say you can't give him Tiamat. Well, last season you couldn't give him Raijin, then you can't give him Merlin, you can't give him any of the top mate. I mean, what on earth do you even give this player at this point, Trelly?
Hey, I'm not saying, like, maybe if there's a way where you could just, maybe box him into an Anubis pick or something, that would probably do a little bit better, I would
He'd still
say.
make that look good somehow.
No, he definitely would, and that's my issue. If you're... I can't analyze what Shinto will look bad on, but I can tell you what he looks good on. And Tiamat is definitely a great place to start. Zap as well, as you said, able to find a lot of crazy damage in this late game Tia fight. Tia fight. I was thinking about Tiamat. But yeah, in this late game team fight, Zap was pretty much popping off here. Great ult. Again, I think Myth touched on it during the cast. It was just a great placement to make sure Cyclone Spin takes a great portion of his HP just to the Suns alone.
Yeah, I mean, Zapman really came up big in these late game team fights. Came up big earlier on. So you can see a 5.5 KDA for the Hunter of the Leviathans. In a game where Zap is not quote-unquote feeding is a bad sign for enemy teams because usually Zapman, the sacrificial lamb here on the Leviathans, usually he's the one going down 0-3 to start things out, and then it's usually not till late game that he can finally get some big damage out there. But when he starts the game off with a double kill, ends around that team fight with basically a double kill to himself there, I mean, Zapman had a great performance on this Hou Yi in game number 1, 6-2 and 10, and going with a slightly different build path. You know, the traditional Hunter builds that we've been seeing as of late have been the Crusher, Aussie, and then we've been seeing a lot more of kind of the attack speed and pen route there. But Zapman ends up going for the Devourer's Gauntlet into the Atlantis bow start.
Yeah, a lot more attack speed there. Just, it gets online a little bit later, but once we saw it, it was definitely swinging. I will say one thing that doesn't look too great for the Titans is that they're the best performing player, top damage, and the only one that didn't go negative was Coach Benji, who I don't think, if we heard correctly, won't be joining them this time. I think SOT is back. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. SOT was unable to make game number 1. He did put a tweet out there, said that he had a little bit of a mishap there in getting there. Is a little bit sick right now. Didn't want to be here in the studio and get anybody else in danger of being sick here. So he's playing from home here in this second game. But we'll be ready to go in game number 2 here. So Benji will be stepping back into the coaching spot to play this second one up. And maybe that can open up some more conversation, though. The conversation, originally wasn't so much around the solo lane. Benji was able to step back in and kind of reprise that role as that solo laner for the team fairly well. This Cthulhu looked nice here in game number 1. Just kind of came down to more of these late game scrappy team fights out of the carries. We'll see what changes up here. Picks and bans for game number 2 between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans. Our show match here of the week, our match of the week, I should say, here in the SPL.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because, again, Leviathans have that option to take away the Khepri right away, which they are going to do. And now, I mean, if you're the Titans, I don't think you're happy with how that draft went, right? I mean, they do opt to go for the second pick slot here, and it's a question of, did you get what you wanted to last time around? Maybe it's just an option of, we're going to take different things away, but going the same way as the Leviathans would expect to take away that Erlong and that Khepri now, and the RDO is already gone.
Yeah, next one was the Gilgamesh out of the Tartarus Titans. We'll see if they hold that same thing. And then they also had a cleanup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, cleanup.
One of their final bans out there out of the Tartarus Titans. And it will still continue. So same bans from game number 1 here in game 2. No reason for the Leviathans to need to change. Their first pick out of this ended up being the Umoja, which was kind of the big question mark of us is, what do the Leviathans decide to go to? Did they want to go for that cleanup is left open? Did they want to prioritize the Zeus? The answer was neither. They went for Umoja. And the Leviathans will keep their same bans with that Camazotz and the clean on the other side. Could just be another run back here. Wrong you on Umoja? I've got no complaints.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would at this point, except maybe if you're the Tartarus Titans, and it looks like the Leviathans are just going to pick that Umoja right away. Here, the Titans have an option to answer back, and the question is, do they go for the same Kabrakan that they put so much stock into last game? Because personally, I was not impressed with Layers on the Kabrakan. He found some decent walls, he found some sort of pressure, but when I think of Layers, I don't think of this Kabrakan pick, and it looks like they do want to run it back, so the Kabrakan will be locked in again. I'm assuming they just think maybe we had the draft, we had the team fight presence, we just didn't execute. That has to be the thought process, right?
Potentially so. We're still not sure if the Kraken will 100% go back to Layers, but if any indication of game 1 would lead us here for game 2, it could be going right back to him. Medusa once more for the Tartarus Titans, the most common, I'm just going to say it, the most common second pick out of any team in the SPL. I mean, not a whole lot of teams are first picking her when she was being first picked. I believe Gorbub said that she's lost like every one of her first pick games out there, so second pick has kind of become that default for her. But now going back over to the Leviathans with all the same things banned away, I mean, if you're Leviathans, you just do the run back.
I mean, you certainly could. Like I said, unless you really thought that you got lucky, which they did, and they had a dominant performance. And right away, the Daji is going to be picked now, and Leviathans can, if they want to, just do the run back. Again, they had a pretty dominant performance. Their team fight was just over, but it looks like they are not going to allow for the run back. They're going to take away this AMC and say, hey, Titans, you can't go for this double AMC comp or double ADC with AMC comp. We're going to take that one away from you.
Yeah, AMC now on the side of the Atlantis Leviathans. The Ho Yi not going to come back, at least for now. Still can be an option if the Leviathans want to draft that one over there for Zapman in the latter half of the picks and bans. It will be Zeus, though, now on the side of the Titans. Does not make it in to being a second or a first-second ban in that next phase. So the Tartarus Titans, they finally have put that stock into Zeus. We'll finally see him come out here in game number 2.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, the Titans had this option last game, right? And then they immediately looked over and said, hey, that's Pantom on Daji. Maybe we shouldn't pick Zeus, so we're not going to do that, and we're just going to ban it away. This time around, though, they see the same Daji and Umoja on the other side, and they find out, hey, maybe, because last game didn't work. And then we have to switch something up. This time around, let's go with the Zeus. Maybe we'll draft enough to protect him. I mean, Paul's positioning is always pretty optional, so I'd say they're going to go for it this time, banning away the Thoth and the Oleron. So it looks like maybe they're not too convinced that this AMC is going into the mid lane, obviously, when we have seen Zap whip it out a few times. And with Shinto, how he played the Tiamat, I would have no qualms with him just running that one back as well.
I mean, the AMC could go to Zap, could go over to Shinto in that mid lane. The Oleron seems to be kind of the common thread of the only remaining magical hunters that are still being picked up. I mean, nobody's dealing with Freya, no one's touching Kronos or really Soul at this point. It seems that it is just this one Oleron pick for the magical ADCs that teams are really continuing to put some favoritism towards. One more ban out of Leviathans. They first start by taking away the Osiris, knowing that SOT is going to be up into this game. That is one of his most common picks and one of his more dominant picks in that solo lane.
Yeah, definitely. And the Bacchus is going to be banned away here, so giving rid of some of that duo lane pressure. Obviously, the Medusa, it's going to bring you some solid team fight presence, but also that early lane pressure you really want. Couple that with the Bacchus, I would say most lanes are going to be having to sit back at least a little bit, even with that Umoja heal. So it looks like the Titans have their option here. Obviously, they went for that triple Guardian comp last time around. We still don't know, as you mentioned, if Kabrakan is going to be going in the hands of Layers for the jungle, or if they could be flexing it to, a solo pick, or even support right now. So the hands are with the Titans right now. They have the options. What are they going to do with it?
Yeah, they've got a lot of flexibility with that Kabrakan, so it's all going to come down to what are these final 2 picks going to be. They still have one option here going up against the Leviathans, though, with this AMC. Still don't know if that's going to be hitting mid lane for Shinto's hands. Don't know if Zapman wanted to get a pick earlier on. For now, though, the Titans are going to go with one of their safer options, Atlas. Going to be locked in, going back over to Aurora. And even despite a loss in that game there, I mean, Aurora was able to make a lot of strides with this god.
Yeah, I would say so. No issue with the Atlas, obviously. Early game pressure, even late game has a solid time. It looks like they're going to answer back with a Cthulhu, the Leviathans, wanting to get Yarkor on this high-pressure, big team fight ultimate and descend into madness. So Cthulhu going to bring some solid damage here to the draft. And the last pick is going to be the Soul here. One of the few magical ADCs, as you mentioned, that actually do get played. Kronos and the Freya, not so much. But Soul has a little bit of viability here. They are hovering it, though. They're not quite sure about this just yet. Do they want to commit to this double ADC comp, or do they want to get some burst in there? And it looks like we actually might see the Kronos make its way out.
Are they just taunting me now? I talk about the gods that we don't really see anymore, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and hover those gods just to really make them talk about it. It won't be Kronos, though. It will be Soul. So the second of the big magical ADCs makes her way in here. And we saw this hover yesterday at a final K with the Jade Dragons. Not sure if we'll see the lock-in. Shiva currently being hovered, now allowed in SPL.
Yo!
And we will get to see the Shiva come out in his first competitive set. Now Trelly, we're going to have to talk about this god just a little bit here. I mean, what kind of insanity do we see coming from this god?
Well, the question remains for me, is this SOT taking Shiva into the solo lane, or is this Layers taking it into the jungle? We've seen... I mean, let me rephrase that. We've heard a little bit of both. The fact that the Shiva jungle has some, you know, it's got some issues, but it also has some high pressure in the early lane, that sort of thing. But also in the solo lane, you really want the movement speed to get the value out of this ultimate. So do you want to put it in the jungle and get some movement speed, or do you want to go in the solo lane? I think personally I'd prefer it in the jungle just because of what everyone's saying. But again, if the last game is any indication, it looks like Layers could take this Kabrakan in the jungle. So it really just depends on what role you're going and how you're going to build this Shiva.
Yeah, it does kind of depend on which one of these ones that SOT wants to play up into here. You know, so you're talking about the Shiva jungle. I mean, this god has a lot in his kit. If you're unfamiliar with what Shiva does, which I don't know how you could be unless you just haven't been playing Smite for like the last 6 weeks or so that this god has been out. I mean, knockups, pulls, tons of mobility, and a ton of sustain, at least with that ultimate throughout to his kit. So wherever this Shiva goes, sure to be causing a riot.
Yeah, I would say so. It really just depends on if Shiva can get ahead and just go into these team fights. The ultimate, very difficult to deal with from ahead, I will say, because if you're trying to run away, not so much movement speed, but it's just the healing, the damage, that sort of thing can be very annoying. And we have to bring that into play. Maybe you don't know how to play against it. That could be the option here. How many times have you faced a Shiva, right? So that is the question at this point. Again, I personally think Shiva's going to need some defense items to get online. So I think, you know, either if it's going to be solo or jungle, it really just depends on how you're choosing to build this character.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we had the Leviathans in here talking with them, you know, during our Kicking It With the Pros Day, a lot of what Yarkor and Panatom were saying was, Yarkor doesn't get to touch this god. This is a Panatom exclusive out of the jungle. I mean, Panatom really did seem to enjoy playing that god in the times that he had to. Not sure how many times this god has popped up, at least in scrims with some of these teams. So it could be a fairly fresh look for a lot of these pros up against there. Though, this is a guy that's been kind of plaguing at least the casual, and now that he's been allowed through even some of those ranked scenes out here. So I'm going to be keeping very close watch on this Shiva pick, Trelly.
Yeah, I'm looking at this team fight present because, again, I think the Shiva into Daji specifically is going to have a good time. You have lots of avenues to immune that pal out. You have a lot of CC immunity already built into your kit. So could just be the counter matchup, could just be trying to start something new, as we mentioned. But you can't look away from the team fight presence that both of these teams have. Lots of AoE damage in the Zeus, and you have the Descent into Madness, even the Supernova, that sort of thing on both sides of the spectrum here. So you're going to have to be watching for these 5v5 team fights. There's going to be a lot of just trickle-down damage.
Yeah, we're looking over here at the Leviathans draft going up against this Zeus in the mid lane. Not a new look for Paul here, but at least a new look here in game number 2, going away from the Hunter and more towards this magical damage dealer. And one of those counters that we did talk about to him is this dodgy pick. If you're the Leviathans, is that where you put your stuff here? Is up against this Zeus. We'll have to find out here in game number 2. Can the Leviathans close this one out, or are the Titans going to take us to 3?
Leviathans look dominant in game number 1. Tartarus Titans have moments of bounce back potential, but fall just a bit short. SOT back in the solo lane for the Titans here in game number 2. He tweeted out his explanation, so if you want a little more info on that, check him out on Twitter. But we do get an interesting first look, Myth, at Shiva here in the SPL. It's going to be Layers piloting this pick out of the jungle.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see it. I had figured we'd see a little bit of Shiva. I didn't think he was going to come out this early, though. Lots of early gank potential. phenomenal displacement, great CC lockdown, especially against a pick like AMC. Pull him in with the first ability, which also has prot reduction, by the way. Knock him up inside that firewall, apply constant damage. I'd argue that Shiva has essentially got one of the most versatile ultimates in the game, long-channeled CC immunity that can either be damage or heals or mana regen, essentially a pre-nerf meditation built into his kit. This is going to be a very interesting god to watch. And you know what, while I'm here, and it's the first time we've seen it, knowledge drop, his third ability can either do constant damage or give you some block stacks for auto attacks, depending on which stance you are. The Bliss, or the other one, the angry one.
The mean one, the not blissful one.
Whatever the opposite of Bliss is.
I was surprised, I am surprised that Layers is picking this one out of the jungle. I think Shiva's very strong, but
I figured solo.
I thought solo lane as well, especially when Cabrakan was picked yet again. I thought Layers was going to run back to Cabrakan. We'd see SOT on the Shiva. But we get our first look at Shiva in the SPL out of the jungle. Panatom back on the Daji. A couple sets of beads to worry about early on here. One for Paul, one for Cyclone Spin. And though Paul back onto a mage, he's piloting the Zeus this game, there is still that early potential myth. Relatively immobile, just like the AMC. Gotta imagine both junglers considering the mid lane as an opportunity, but right now all the fighting's happening on right. Panatom run down in Layers on Shiva has found first blood. The body block's obnoxious, but Yarkor can dash through him anyway. Tartarus Titans grab first blood.
Man, that chain CC just so filthy. Had Panatom been able to channel the 1,000 cuts a little bit earlier, the pull-in from Layers would not have applied, and he would have avoided the knock-up immediately afterward. But because he was pulled in, I believe there is no counterplay. You are getting knocked up immediately because the pull-in into knock-up combo is true, unless you beads midair from the knockup, which is just not ideal from the offset. So, early play from Layers, making sure he hits the ground running, does cost him his blink at least. So, Panatom can similarly get active with blink elsewhere on the map. Gonna be a little while till we see Layers do the same.
It'll be interesting to watch how this dual lane works throughout this game here, Myth, because Aurora and Cyclone Spin, the Medusa and the Atlas combo respectively, should be able to get active pretty early here in this lane. Zapman needs a little bit of time to wind up. Wrong you back on the Emoja. I think that's... I wonder what kind of a sign that gives us from the Titans, where Rongyu has the type of game he did in game number 1 on Yamoja. And what would you say it was, 17 games and only lost 2 of them last year?
That's right.
Now off to a great start on Yamoja here in Season 9. Letting Rongyu get Yamoja first has got to be a sign that the Titans feel like they've got something figured out on how to play around it.
Yeah, I would argue it's probably a sense of confidence given to him by Rongyu falling a couple times in the early game. In game 1, getting involved, finding great ultimates, but not having the follow-up built around him may have made it look a little bit weaker than it actually was. Similarly, we talked about his slash line. It didn't look so impressive because he was dying so early in some of those engagements despite setting up so much.
Aurora stunned. Panatom over to the dual lane.
That's the dash.
Desperately dashing away, but it's caught out by the stun. 1,000 cuts is in, but Aurora is pulled. Panatom right back, and Aurora lives. A Petrify is huge from Cyclone Spin. Layers through on the counter gank as Zapman desperately disapparating away towards a tier 1 tower. Zap will live. But the fact that Aurora does as well is absurd, and Panatom empty-handed 0-2 to start this game.
I believe Panatom hits level 5 post-mortem there, so no chance for the Palau to be targeted out, and, well, Layers getting involved everywhere on the map. There's that strength of the ultimate. No movement speed penalty. You're just able to walk him down.
No!
What?
Cyclone Spin dashes beneath the tier 1 tower, has to use the beads.
Surely he's
but
dead.
Zapman has got no mana.
Wow.
And how you make a play like that and are able to survive, I guess Zapman being level 4 and Layers close by at level 6 makes a difference. Can they delay the backs, though? Can the Leviathans keep Cyclone Spin and Layers here in lane? Panatom does have ultimate. Cyclone Spin beneath the tier 1 tower without beads, and it looks like purple buff invade is what the Leviathans will grab.
Bro, I almost choked on my tongue right there. He dashed into the tower. I was not ready for it. I don't even remember what I was talking about. I think I was breaking down
I was terrified
like
of
Shiva.
that as a kid, by the way.
Like choking on your tongue?
Yeah.
That's an irrational fear, I think.
Yeah, well, I was scared of it when I was a kid.
Why'd you stop being scared of it?
Because I realized it was an irrational fear.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, but you said you nearly did it, so maybe I'm scared of it again if it can happen.
Dave, I promise it won't happen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Smith. What a start the Tartarus Titans have had. A world or 2 different worlds out of the jungle right now, where Layers on Shiva has hit Paydirt a couple of times here. The early pressure has just been so strong out of this pick. Whereas Panatom nearly make something happen, ends up falling for his troubles a second time, and it is a totally different start from the Titans and the Leviathans from what we saw in Game 1.
Yeah, Layers already off to a level lead. Looks to be going straight down that damage tree. Believe it will be likely a Crusher in the next slot, which benefits from some of those kit passives that you're able to pick up. Second ability, when in the Bliss stance, gives you a 25% attack speed stim. So picking up Crusher means that you can be swinging pretty quickly early on in some of these matches. So I'm excited to see how Layers itemizes going forward. Trelly brings up on the desk that he thinks we will likely see some bruiser tendency from Layers. I tend to agree because that ultimate has got a timer on it as far as I'm concerned. Very early game at level 5, Shiva ultimate dominant. You're dealing enough damage that everyone has to be afraid. You're CC immune and there's not enough DPS in the game that you can really just burn them out of it at level 5. Maybe up to like level 12. That's when it starts to fall off a little bit and everybody else has enough damage that they can kind of ignore it. Because in the late game, I believe it channels up to about 800 damage total, which is not a whole lot. It's standard for an ultimate, right. But it's broken up over multiple parts. It takes a long time to channel all that damage. And everybody else, they're going to do it quickly.
Panatom dashes into a double stun from Sod. Are we trying to tower dive this? None of the chains are good. 2 ultimates used, and 2 big ultimates at that. Descent into Madness
that's gold
and
for sure.
Powwow. That means the Titans rotate over towards the left side of the map. Gold Fury confirmed, and the Titans can do no wrong. 2 kills. That turns into a massive gold lead at 1,600, 7 minutes in for the Tartarus Titans. And Panatom, I mean, it's just been brutal. Nothing has worked out for the jungler so far this game.
No, but the experience is still largely equalized as SOT tries to walk his way out again.
Gotta get a kill here, right? No, it's another double stun from Sot. The trembles are great, but SOT might just be too tanky.
No way.
Panatom takes another tower shot. Layers has Blink, and Layers has Gap Close. On the right side of the map, he goes Shell. Will it be enough? The dash away should be. SOT lives, and another instance of a gank not working out for Panatom. How differently this game could look, or would look, if Aurora had died and Panatom lived, and if they get a kill onto SOT on any of those initiations there. This is nuts. The Leviathans just, they can't buy a kill right now.
No, it has been tough, and you gotta just see one go in so you can get some rolling a little bit later on.
Just a reminder you can score, right?
Yeah. I am curious that Layers decides to go immediately into the ultimate there. I thought maybe we'd see him dash forward, try and channel that first ability. Likely had used it to clear out some of those camps, so has to go into the ultimate to chase out that kill. Panatom narrowly escapes with his life by teleporting to an ally. But as I was saying before, we saw another tower dive attempt on an SOT. Golden experience, not as largely separated as you would expect. It's double kill, 2 kills for the Tartarus Titans, 1 first blood, 1 standard, and a neutral objective. Early Gold Fury, experience, gold, I'd expect it to be way higher than it is.
I mean, the massive dip down is that Gold Fury that you see there 7 or so minutes into this game. That's the big difference maker. Was a few hundred gold. Experience largely the same. Shinto has been left alone in mid with Paul, and Shinto has a 1-level lead. Zapman's been left alone on the left side of the map. Zapman has a 1-level lead. It's really over on right where the Titans have extended their experience lead a little bit. 1 level in the jungle. That's no surprise because everything Layers has done has seemed to have worked out this game, whereas Panatom has been quite the opposite. I'm so interested in how this power curve looks for Layers because we know Shiva's strong early in this game. You get a Jotuns, you get a Brawlers, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage. But if there's a fall off, when there's a fall off, these are the types of things we're going to get to learn here, at least in game 1, or in our first game of Shiva here in the SPL.
Yeah, I am curious. I'd expected Crusher, Brawler Speed Stick. He's a great applicator of it. The majority of his abilities being AoE, even the dash, doing an aura of damage around him will apply that Brawler Speed Stick passive. But I think come late game, if he keeps going down this damage style build, we'll see him stop using his ultimate for damage and instead just become a healer for his team. Just really channeling out to go for these elongated engagements around the Fire Giant, around the Oni Fury. It's all conjecture. It's all guessing. I'm doing guesswork here. We haven't seen a whole lot of Shiva at the top level of play. I am curious to see how it pans out.
Is that what you always do?
No. It's usually educated guesswork.
Educated guesses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're slightly educated guessing on this. At the SPL level, that you're right, total guesswork. But
I don't even think we've seen him in the SEC just yet.
I don't think so either. I think this is the first week where Shiva's been allowed. And Layers is going to pick it up. So I'm excited to see if this power curve continues. Shinto's got a lot of damage early on in his build. Fully stacked Transcendence immediately into a hi-rez. And again, that 1-level lead over Paul. I'm surprised, Myth, that we haven't seen more pressure on either of these mid laners, especially pre-level 12. Now Paul's got Aegis. Shinto will likely have Aegis the next time he ends up going back to base. Feels like there were some opportunities with some of this immobility over in the mid lane, but both mid laners able to escape the early game without any deaths.
And speaking of mid laners, Shinto goes for a slightly different build. Generally, we see Crusher pretty early for these Hunter mids into the Transcendence, or Transcendence into Crusher, depending on how quickly you want to stack up. Instead, Hydra's Lament in the second slot. Looks like Shinto's going for all burst potential as the Atlantis Leviathans take Pyromancer with 0 opposition from the Tartarus Titans. Stinger into Swarm of Bees, auto-canceling each. Both proccing the Hydra's Lament passive, already benefiting from Defense Shred. That was a 240 damage auto attack onto Aurora.
Yeah, that was a lot of damage into the Atlas, who now has to leave layers with no mana. Dashes away as well. Pyromancer taken down in the meantime by the Leviathans. Closes up that gold gap even just a little bit further. I wonder if Shinto is able to itemize this way, Myth, because of the way Zapman is building. You're almost building as a pseudo-physical mage in a way. All that burst damage. Zapman, of course, going to shred down targets as the game goes on. Maybe opens the door to Shinto to build a little bit here this way. And a strong start to Zapman's build. A couple important items in that back pocket. Might start to be able to expect some big damage from Soul here in any of the fights that might break out on left.
I'd completely forgotten about this style of build path for Magical Hunters. That Typhon's Fang in the second slot giving you a large infusion of power, some decent lifesteal, but most importantly likely is that 10% penetration immediately. You're also benefiting from getting additional lifesteal from Ring of Hecate. So you're essentially double dipping down that lifesteal tree. You've already got self-sustain for Zapman on this Soul with the first ability. He's going to be able to tank up objectives pretty efficiently going forward. I'm thinking if the Leviathans, or Zapman specifically, is left alone with a Fury, once he finishes up this next item, he'll likely be able to start soloing them.
Yeah, I wonder if Zap is going to open himself up to some of that. The Leviathans love to fight around those objectives at a team, but if the Titans give the opening, absolutely something Zapman should be expected to take advantage of. The game is slowed down. Really the only couple of things we saw were some early pressure from layers. The rest of the Leviathans group up around this Oni Fury, and it is massively burning down. Ultimate up from Aurora. Ultimate flies through, and it was right on time, but the Leviathans secure the objective. But there is a chase here from the rest of the Titans. Aurora unable to pull in Yarkor. Descended into madness. Look at the damage
Re-engage,
that
maybe.
Paul and Cyclone have taken on the back line. Long-range damage from Shinto in onto Cyclone. He's got to leave over by the purple buff. And the Leviathans surge forward. Pentatom barely makes it up into the Palau. Ends up getting burnt down by Detonate. A 1-for-1 trade plus the Fury. Now the Leviathans suddenly the ones running.
They are. Cyclone Spin low HP. If Zapman knows he's there, maybe we would have seen some aggressive play, but Aussie passive should resustain as Layers gets involved.
And this is how obnoxious Shiva can be to play against. The knock up, the pull in. You got to get out of that fire circle. Both actives end up being used by Shinto there in that fight. I love Layers still remaining aggressive even after the Fury has already gone down. Purple buff's about to respawn here. Zapman doesn't have ultimate. Layers had a ward on this side of the jungle. Zapman's wondering why there's a ward there. And that's exactly why. Zapman forced into the Aegis. And Layers, whether it's kills, assists, or burning off relics, has had a massive impact in the first 14 minutes.
Zapman with the horse blinders on there, sees that SOT is stealing away some of his flowers, does not notice Layers hovering nearby inside the purple buff, and that's a good look at the burst potential this Shiva's going to have. What was that, 70% of Zapman's HP and his relic lost immediately? That's tough. Now, the Tartarus Titans can start to look towards him a little bit more so. Luckily, Zapman has still got the beads for CC immunity. The ultimate will be coming up very shortly, and a sap rate, being one of the best safety tools any mage has, should keep him relatively happy and healthy going forward. With no Gold Fury on the map just as of yet, the Tartarus Titans can't even force a fight on this side and try and leverage the fact that both Shinto and Zapman are going to have to play very cautiously.
Yeah, speaking of Shinto, you mentioned maybe seeing a Crusher at some point in this build. Does pick it up at this third item. So you'll get some more of that attack speed later on in the build. And that'll help out Shinto, of course, and then, of course, some flat penetration. On the other side, though, Myth, Paul has got an Ob Shard. So double flat pen immediately into percent pen with the Obsidian Shard.
And
this is different not only from how Paul sometimes builds. I'm more used to seeing Paul do something like Divine Ruin into like Breastplate of Valor, and then
Book of the Dead.
Book of the Dead, right? Sure. Celestial Legion sometimes here and there. More bruisery, more defensive, but Paul has gone straight into damage. So you should see the full brunt of what Zeus can do in some of these fights as this game goes on.
And he's going to have easy targets to apply that Chain Lightning to. Zeus, I think, deceptively strong up against the likes of Cthulhu. If Yarkor steps forward, he's essentially just a massive shield for Paul to bounce off of.
Yarkor did step forward, but right into SOT. Paul at range on the Zeus. Wrong, you throws
Nearly.
up. River's Rebuke, but a small gap allows Aurora out the right-hand side. I like that about the way Wrong You plays this pick. You know, you throw it out, see if the rest of the team can rally around it. But in all likelihood, now the Leviathans play disengage for the next couple of minutes or so while that ultimate comes back up. Feels like when Wrong You is on this pick, really when any team has this Emoja in the roster, you're waiting around those Rivers Rebuke to make something happen. Wrong You will not steal it away, though it was close. Both supports miffed this game. Come very close to stealing away some of these objectives. But the Titans will get this one quietly.
Cyclone Spin being on this side of the map makes me think the Tartarus Titans want to force a fight, could likely start looking towards this Fire Giant. No tier 1 tower in mid, and Cyclone still having not backed means that Zapman should have some time to farm up on the opposite side. Spotted out on a ward, though. Gonna have to play cautiously, as 3 members of the Tartarus Titans are hovering near the left. Yeah. I suppose Cyclone just makes the rotation for the Pyromancer, which allows Zapman to essentially catch back up fully in experience, now both sitting at level 16.
Yeah, that... Look how long the Rivers Rebuke cooldown is. I maybe underestimated it a little bit. It is still just halfway back. And it's been, what I assume has been a little over a minute. I don't know, Myth.
65 seconds.
Time flies when we're having fun, and you and I are having a whole lot of fun.
It was 70 seconds.
104, so it's 140 seconds. Little CDR maybe in the build.
Dude, every patch that cooldown goes up, man. You know how hard it is to keep track? It's difficult.
Look, here's what we know. It's long, right?
That's right.
It's a
More than 1
cooldown.
minute.
You build a little CDR, you get that down a little bit lower, but it's a hefty cooldown. And so I really feel like it might be a double, it's such a double-edged sword where you'd love to save it for a big team fight, but Wrong You uses it sometimes as just an initiation tool for an individual pick. It's such a, I don't know, it's an interesting kind of theory conversation to have. Like Dharmic Pillars, you throw it out and the cooldown's so low, you're not worried about it. With Rivers Rebuke just now coming back up, the Leviathans have had to play a little bit more defensively without their support ultimate, but now both teams hovering around the Fire Giant. Certainly think at 18 minutes, if a team fight goes heavily one way or another, Fire Giant should be up next.
I'd briefly thought we'd see Demonic Grip from Zapman just to get a little bit more % penetration in his build. Instead, it's the Telkine's Ring, which is going to help out a lot against some of these tankier targets, especially around these objectives, but might not get the chance.
Disapparating away. So Zapman will live. Rivers Rebuke is just going to separate the mid lane in 2. And look at the supernova damage on the backside of this fight. Cyclone Spin has to dash away. Lightning Storm has completely separated us in the mid lane. Panatom again can't finish off a kill, but Yarkor has got it this time. Layers double dashes away. Shinto has got another. And the Cthulhu on the chase. But too mobile is Layers. And somehow the Tartarus Titans come up empty-handed. I thought that Sot was going to live. I thought that Cyclone Spin were going to live. But the Leviathans find 2 picks. They start hovering by the Fire Giant.
A 10% HP soul is all it takes to bait out the entirety of the Tartarus Titans, and Zapman has already made great use of his build to resustain as Yarkor will act as a wall. Aurora creates an opening to walk in. Can Paul maybe steal this away? No, Aurora's already dead. Shinto takes him out with the Stinger, and Fire Giant will follow suit. Now, 5 members of the Leviathans with the most important buff on their belts, and with a lead for the first time this game, can start to work their way all the way across the map. And
that's not true, Miff. Look at 14 minutes.
Okay, man. with the first sizable lead of the game, the Leviathans can start their siege in earnest. With plenty of tier 1 towers and a gold period to pick up, this is going to be a massive infusion of gold into the coffers of the Order side team. And their siege potential is incredibly high, just by nature of having essentially a double hunter composition, 1 physical, 1 magical. Shinto and Zap will make short work of any tower that stands between them. Look, this is going to be a difficult defense for the Tartarus Titans. Namely, the engage being so strong for the Leviathans means that you're going to spend a lot of your time as a Titans frontliner probably just peeling out for Paul. Paul's cooldown, Lightning Storm, that's got to be the indicator. Yeah. If he drops that and the fight goes well immediately afterward, the fight is going to go well for the Tartarus Titans. But if he's using it just to separate engagements like we saw in the last one, it's not. You need that damage output.
And you saw even last game what like a big circular Ho-Yi ultimate can do in a fight from Zapman, and how it completely flipped around that initiation. Petrify out.
Curious.
But so is Zapman. Aurora is behind Zap, but the Zap rate well timed. That is absurd. That's all Shinto. Stinger goes out, and Aurora's just being shredded. And look at Shinto's build. Transcendence, Hydra's, Crusher, and all that damage sets up for a kill onto Aurora. That Zapman also shreds. I don't think Aurora realized quite how much damage the Leviathans were able to deal in such a short amount of time. Shinto's got 13k damage. The next closest is Yarkor at 7,000, and everyone else is kind of clumped up in that 6,000 to 4,000 range. And then there stands Shinto with the way that his build has gone. Made a massive impact on Aurora's health bar there, and is now giving the Leviathans a 5 versus 4.
Man, just the burst potential. Titan's Bane giving you additional penetration on first ability that hits a god. Massive. You've already got so much burst potential between the power stack of Transcendence and the Hydra's Lament. We saw it. What was that? Stinger auto, Swarm of Bees auto, and it was 80% of Aurora's HP just lost out. Aurora does not have a whole lot of defense quite yet. Still working on that third item. No true dedicated defense that can really deal with what Shinto's bringing at this point, though. I think Aurora likely going to be shredding that quickly for the rest of this game.
Yeah, Aurora's level 13 to the 20.
It's only 7 levels.
The 20 of Shinto and the 20 of Zapman. Yeah, I mean, levels alone, you know, even if itemization was equal, levels alone, I mean, Aurora's just so far behind. Which is interesting. You know, we have not seen effectiveness. We've seen mitigated effectiveness, maybe. I'll give Aurora some credit. Say again?
Efficacy.
Define.
That's effectiveness.
Yeah, sure. We've had mitigated efficacy from Aurora.
It sounds worse. I think.
Agreed.
Is effectiveness a word, though?
It's got to be.
Because I know efficacy is.
It just efficacy means effectiveness, right? I mean,
I don't know. English sucks.
Yeah, we're going to figure it out at some point, Myth, but it's not going to be here on cast. We have seen limited success from Aurora on this pick. And Aurora, like, swears by the Atlas, thinks it's so good. I do think it's a good pick, but just the way that these games have been going, Aurora's just not been able to get the ball rolling out of support here. Shinto reaches full build. The Leviathans knock down every single... There are 5 towers on the map a second ago, and the Leviathans just get all of them. And this power play, the gold swing, I don't often get to look at it, but 8,000 gold in a pretty short amount of time feels good for the Leviathans. Oh my God. All of their gold lead is on the Fire Giant power play. And the XP as well. Look, the Titans were active early, Myth. But this feels like how the Leviathans can turn... Do you see his player cam? He leans his head back, sighs heavily, wrong you with a little smirk.
Dude, he's still cheesing.
This is a Leviathans team who feel good about where they're at. And what I was going to say before wrong you BM'd a solo laner is that the Leviathans, again, you know, we talked about the Dragons yesterday and the way that they've diversified their win conditions. I think the Leviathans have done the same, where sometimes they'll come out early, they'll swing. That's what they did in game 1. Also a type of team that can fall behind by a few kills, pump the brakes, and then realize when they hit their power spikes. And they've been near immaculate over the last couple minutes after dropping a couple kills to layers early.
I think we forget so often that this is the squad, Sanguine previously, that would not be able to play an early game phase. This was the portion of the game that they have always been strongest at.
Oh, no, Myth.
But, you know, Wrong-U's already got him. This is going to be massive.
It's got to be a big Rivers Rebuke here, right? It is. It separates everyone. Paul, alone in the Rivers Rebuke as Yarkor's running down the back line. Paul zooming away as best as he can. Layers helping out the rest of his team. Palau is out, and Paul is back. Shinto has shredded down the necessary target. Zapman has done the same as well. The Atlantis Leviathans fell behind early in this game, but they will knock down the Tartarus Titans in 2. They will take the game, and they will take the set.
They're going to have to go back and take out a Phoenix as well eventually. Can't hit the Titan just yet. SOT buys a little bit of time, but only because of
my
double
carry
for Zapman. The Leviathans convincing the Tartarus Titans. I understand the positioning there. They say, no way the Leviathans are hiding in our back camps with a Fire Giant spawning right now. Unfortunately for the Titans, just incorrect in their analysis. The Leviathans look dominant here. I'd had some slight concerns considering the stumble against the Oni Warriors, but I'm not concerned anymore. Are you?
No, and we're going to get another look at the Oni Warriors later on today. Let's see if they can get things back on track, but I'm not concerned about the Leviathans at all. Look, it's a long year. It's a very competitive year in the SPL. We already know that. Teams are going to face some stumbles. The Leviathans are going to lose another set at some point. Can't wait for this to be clipped after they've gone undefeated.
Are you sure?
They will lose a set at some point, I promise you. whether it's now or
next year,
season
5 years
11,
from
maybe,
now.
who knows? It'll happen. The Leviathans look dominant here in this one. There were moments from the Titans, but just not enough moments to make a story. The Leviathans 2-0 over the Tartarus Titans start off our Saturday. Quick break. The desk will break this one down.
muchas bendiciones que me faltan. Necesito tu paciencia, hablando rico, hablando caro, con mi mente clara, Hay muchas bendiciones que me faltan. Necesito tu paciencia, hablando rico, hablando caro, con mi mente clara.
Charlie, you busy, man?
No, I got time. What's up?
Hey, so Shiva's out to play now for the pros, but a lot of our players don't really know what this god does. You think you can help me out on talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, I could try to help, but I don't really have a whiteboard.
Don't worry, man. I got you covered.
What's this guy gonna do?
There we go.
Huh.
Pretty nice.
Look at that.
But I gotta know what we're talking about. So, Shiva. What does this god do?
Main thing to remember about Shiva is he got 2 different stances, right? He's got his Bliss stance and his Destruction. Destruction, boom. Same ability, different passive. This time, gonna be a big old circle when he's in Destruction. There's some extra fire. You're gonna get Prot if you're an enemy. Second ability, looks sort of like this. Has some options. Knock up, you can choose where you want to, but when you're in Destruction stance, you get some attack speed debuff to the enemies that are in the range. Third ability, dash, chill, dash. And when you're in your Destruction stance, gonna be some extra fire damage during that dash. And then his ult, he starts dancing. He starts dancing, he can go wherever he wants, healing or damage, depending on which one you want.
But, like you said, he's got 2 stances. That's Destruction. His Bliss stance, it looks the same. You still have that cool fire, but it's a blue fire effect, and you get movement speed whenever you're inside of that thing instead. Same thing with the second ability. That doesn't change. That's still the cool little knock up there. You can choose where you want to hit, but you give your allies attack speed if you ever hit them with that one. Third ability also does that, but it's way cooler than just doing damage. You get block stacks. Those things are OP, man.
That's
Everybody
broken.
wants block stacks out here. Ultimate, that doesn't change either. You just dance on your full, smack some abilities, get some heals, get some damage. And that is how you play Shiva.
It's just that easy. That's how you play Shiva. If you couldn't tell what was going on in that last game as to what Shiva could do, hopefully you learned a little bit there in our little video with Shiva. But the Atlantis Leviathans come out on top here in our second game of this set. Take the nice 2-0 win over the Tartarus Titans, and a pretty convincing one here, Charlie. I mean, starting out that game, the Tartarus Titans were able to find at least a little bit of room to find some kills out there. Layers is able to get some early strides. But when it comes down to these late-game team fights, the Leviathans are able to rally themselves together to get those wins.
Yeah, that's their bread and butter. Maybe give up some ganks here and there because Shiva does have a pretty strong early game. But late game, the carries were always going to come online. Zap and Shinto were able to get some crazy amounts of damage off. And obviously the tanks, Yarkor and Rongyu, were providing the peel and setup that the team needed.
I mean, this is a dream scenario for a Cthulhu here, is to not be affected by really any of the carries, find 3 people with that knockup during the ultimate form, and then just basically go uncontested the entire way through here. I mean, the Leviathans basically got to coast when it came to these late-game team fights. I mean, you can even see here, 20 minutes in, still with a 3K gold lead, Zap able to get away from 2 separate ganks, one from Cyclone there, and then one from Aurora, and then even turn that one around here. Leviathans looking pretty poised here in Game 2.
Yeah, I would say so. As we mentioned before, they did take a fall to the Oni Warriors. Were we going to see the fall of the Leviathans where they just, they can't play up to that standard that they've set for themselves? I would say no. They still are the kings of the map at the moment, and they still look great doing it. Obviously, that late-game team fight is where they're going to shine, and they looked great.
Yeah, a bit of a tumble last week, but bringing it all back together here in this set up against the Tartarus Titans. We got that Worlds rematch in game number 1, where Benji was subbing in here in game number 2. SOT is still able to hold pretty firm there over into the solo lane, but one player does not a difference make for this team. Leviathans come out with the win here. Zapman undying, the only one actually falling in this game, going to be Panatom here. The rest of the Leviathans with nice clean records in that death column.
Yeah, Panatom had a little bit of struggles here hitting them Palos, but besides that, solid team play from the whole roster, obviously. And as long as your carries are able to output this much damage, you're going to be sitting pretty. Shinto in that mid lane, though, 16,000. Double what anyone on the Titans were even able to do.
Yeah, I mean, the closest to him was Paul at that halfway point, 8,000 damage there on the Zeus. Paul not really given much room to breathe during this set up here, not really given too much leeway. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot with these teams, talking about just how good the front line is for this team to hold them out. We've got one of the frontliners here for Leviathan standing by. We got Rongyu for our post-game interview. Rongyu, first off, congrats on your win out here.
Thank you.
After the loss against the Warriors, a lot of discussion was going around. Is this going to be the fall of Leviathans? Was there ever any real doubt in your mind you guys were going to be able to bring things back?
No, I mean, it's better when people don't expect anything from you, so you just play the game and it's more chill. I mean, right now and before I was just chilling, and I feel like we're just like kind of lost in the meta, but now I think we're just adapting better, and yeah, just looking forward.
Well, you got your first competitive game up against Shiva now. Whenever you guys saw that one locked in, was there any expectations on there? Or you guys kind of know how to play around that?
Well, I know what the God does, especially after the video I just saw. And yeah, I think the God is really good. I wanted to try and support maybe sometime, but Layers beat me, so unfortunate.
Unfortunate that
Yeah.
Layers ended up getting the slip on you this time. Hey, maybe another set out there. But as far as the rest of your season goes through, getting your win here now against one of the other top teams. I mean, does that give you guys a little bit more hope as the season goes on to try and remain one of those top seeds?
Well, to be honest, at the end of the day, the playoff is what matters. Like being first, second, third wouldn't matter to us. But yeah, I'm just looking to get more wins and get a great season.
Well, you guys look good in your win here today. Congrats on the win. I'll let you get back with the team to celebrate. Thanks for standing by for the interview.
Thank you.
Just feeling good across the board here for the Leviathans, and they should. I mean, getting a 2-0 over the Titans, one of the teams that was predicted to be one of these top seeds out here, it's sure to be a nice little boost there for the Leviathans team.
I mean, I've got a boost because, Rung, you said that we showed him how to play Shiva.
Hey, that's a win in our book there. Hey, across the table high five. There we go. That's a win for us there. Also, maybe a win for my fantasy team. That's wrong. You on my side there. Unfortunate for you. Poor man. Poor
Right,
guy.
well, I don't want to talk about fantasy right now.
But a good set here out of Leviathans. We still got more SPL to go, though. This is only our first set of the day, and still only our first set of multiple more to come out here. We got one more going on today. That's going to be the Valhalla Valkyries up against the Oni Warriors for our second and final set of today. And then, as always, make sure that you're still tuning in tomorrow. We're going to start a little bit earlier than normal for SPL. 11 a.m. is going to be our start time tomorrow. But make sure you're still sticking around for this set here, because there's still a little bit on the line here. Valkyries trying to find their first win of the season. Oni Warriors, after their win up against the Leviathans, sitting pretty nice. Lost to the Dragons, doesn't feel so great. They want to try and reprise that and get this record back up a little bit nicer.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the Leviathans at the top of the list right now, knowing that they lost to the tied for number 6 team right now, the Oni Warriors. But again, are the Oni Warriors going to coast off that win and say, hey, this is the gameplay that we are able to output, pretty regularly, or are they going to fall down to where they are at the moment, towards the bottom? It really just depends, because the Valks, they've shown a lot of presence. They really do have some solid gameplay, but they're still a very young team.
Yeah, new team here into the league, still trying to deal with some of the growing pains of coming into the SPL. I mean, maybe the good news now is Benny's not going to be 1v5ing in the studio. He's got a couple of his other teammates here to try and back him up through here. It should be a good game, though, Trelly.
Yeah, I hope so. At the very least, it's going to be a solid mid lane matchup. NEQ not one to shy away from trying to hard carry this game. We saw in that Zhang Kui game the other day, he had dropped like 10 kills. So definitely some playmakers, at least on the Valks, that are able to, show up when it need to.
Well, the good news is we've only got a few minutes before we jump into that game. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with the Valkyries versus the Warriors right after.